This is Adam Graham from Pretty Much the Present, bringing you a week of old-time radio podcasts. These episodes were originally released back in 2011, and we're releasing them here pretty much as is, with only some extraneous bits such as the opening from all of the episodes after the first episode removed. Because these are old, it should be noted that any offers or promotions mentioned in the episode may not be valid unless they're currently mentioned on the Great Detectives website. Here now is a week of old-time radio detective podcast. Welcome to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham. If you have a comment, email it to me, box13@greatdetectives.net. Follow us over on Twitter at Radio Detectives and give us a call, 208-991-4783. Well, before we do get started, I do want to remind you that we have a lot of interesting and topical articles we post every week at greatdetectives.net. We post 1 to 2 per week, and it can be about mysteries, classic television shows, old-time radio, and much more. There's a lot to see. We have articles posted there every weekend at greatdetectives.net, and you can also have these articles automatically delivered to your Kindle, and you can try that out free for 2 weeks. Now it's time for today's episode of Barrie Craig, Confidential Investigator, Ghost of a Chance.
William Gargan stars as Barrie Craig, confidential investigator.
There's a place somewhere, folks, away from the hurly-burly, where everything is slow and easy, and you can sleep around the clock without being heckled. I could be referring to a cemetery.
The National Broadcasting Company presents William Gargan in another transcribed drama of mystery and adventure with America's #1 detective, Barrie Craig, confidential investigator.
Barrie Craig speaking. On call like I am as a confidential investigator, the open door, come one, come all, you don't always get cases that run according to Hoyle. Every once in a while, you catch yourself a Lulu, a case that puts a strain on your imagination. A case, say, in the category of spookaroo. You find yourself hobnobbing with ghosts and talking turkey to the dead. One like that began for me in the New York office of the Trans-Southern Insurance Company of Omaha. I've been urgently requested to come calling, please, by a claims agent named Brennahan, Roy C. Brennahan.
I'll explain the assignment we have for you, Craig.
Before you do, answer me this. What's with your regular investigators? Why pull an outsider in?
Well, we want this investigated unofficially. We don't want to stir up anything that will expose us to a libel suit.
I catch. In case you're pulling a boner that's abused, harassing innocent people.
Yes.
What's the story?
Our file number 15466. Double indemnity case, now officially closed. We paid out $50,000 to the widow of a subway accident victim named Remo Torch. This was 90 days ago.
So?
I'll now play you a recording I secretly made of an anonymous telephone call I was party to yesterday. Now listen carefully, Craig.
Hello. Hello, Mr. Roy Brennahan, please.
This is Roy Brennahan speaking.
I've got some information for you.
Yes?
Your company paid a $50,000 claim to a Mrs. Remo Torch 3 months ago. You remember it?
Of course, sir. Remo Torch fell to his death off a subway platform. What about it?
The claim was a fraud. It wasn't Remo Torch who fell under a train.
But his widow identified the body.
The identification was false.
Who are you?
A friend. Goodbye.
Mister, wait, don't hang up. Identify yourself and there's a bonus.
But my anonymous caller hung up, Craig, without identifying himself. I thought about it overnight, and today I called you in.
Oh, it could be a crank call or an envious relative with a weird sense of humor. You must get 1,000 crackpot telephone calls.
Yes, we do. We can't ignore them. Even if there's the smallest possibility
Of recovering a paid-out claim. Yeah, I've heard about the insurance claims agents, the fanatical watchdogs you fellows get to be. You're hoping and praying I turn up a scheming widow and proof that a third party was pushed off that subway platform and the corpse palmed off on you as Remo Torch.
Handle this delicately, as if we have nothing to do with it. Like it's a case of your own.
I can't be too delicate about exhuming a body. I need to get a court order for that. So do you want to get yourself another boy?
No, I'll stick with you, Craig.
Or be stuck with me? 10%, Branahan. Any monies I recover for good old Trans-Southern, earmark 10% for Barrie Craig. While waiting for red tape to unravel on the court order for exhumation of a corpse, I went to see the scheming widow. 169 Seneca Street was her last known address. The street where the drunks outnumbered everybody else. I ran into a very curious development at 169 Seneca. No widow Torch. The janitor, who looked like his mind wandered, explained the widow's absence.
Widow Torch is dead.
A dead policyholder and a dead, though rich, beneficiary. I had quite a cast of live suspects. The next evening, I drove myself to the Hillcrest Cemetery on Sycamore Street out in Long Island, where the mangled remains of Remo Torch had been buried. I had a signed court order okaying exhumation to serve on the caretaker there, an old geezer named Sam Billings. Going through the big iron gate, I heard the night chime. Night is a nice time to go calling on a graveyard if you hate yourself. Every superstition you had as a kid comes back to haunt you. You begin to see things and hear things. Going up a narrow path toward the caretaker's house, I heard things. A scream as if somebody was being murdered not 50 yards away. I got to the scream. It was the old caretaker Billings on the ground near an open grave and a dead faint. Caretaker came to, pop-eyed as if he'd seen the devil and clawing at me as if I was the devil. Quit it, Billings.
Knock away.
Keep choking me and I'll have to flatten you. I'm Barrie Craig, a confidential investigator now concentrating on insurance. Now, if you can collect your wits, old man.
You're an investigator.
Who'd you think I was?
Him.
Him? Who?
The isn't dead.
Makes sense, old man.
I was making my rounds like every night. And I heard a noise. Noise I'll never forget if I live to be 100.
The odds are away against you, the hypertension you've got.
I turned to look, bringing my lights close. And it was the lid of a coffin coming off, as if by itself.
Neatest trick of the century. And then what happened?
I lived to be 100.
We've already been through that.
Then the dead man got up and stood there. And I was just standing here, all green under the moon.
How does the rest of the hallucination go?
I watched him go off, not making a sound, and walking in a funny little hop. And then...
You screamed and fainted dead away. The next thing you knew, you had your fingernails in my neck. Now get your bearings and throw a light on that coffin. I want to have a look.
See, the casket is empty.
Empty it is. So a stiff came to, forced the lid open, turned green under the moon, and then went on the town.
It's something to believe, but I saw it with my own eyes.
With that 20/20 vision you don't have, did you also see who dug him up?
Dug him up?
That's what I asked, if you'll really open your eyes. 6 feet of dirt piled in 2 neat hills on both sides of the grave, see it?
Yes.
To get out from under, your stiff needed a muscular accomplice on the outside. Who was supposed to be buried in that grave? I can't make out the name on the tombstone.
Torch. Remo Torch.
The case was coming to life, but literally. I left caretaker Billings to sleep off his jitters and got into my car. Driving down tree-shaded Sycamore Street, my headlights picked up a character moving along the sidewalk in a funny little hop. A Funny little hop were exactly the words the caretaker had used describing his stiff who'd come alive. My man on the sidewalk was loping along like that, a kind of hop, skip, like a guy who had no control over his reflexes. I switched from brights to dims, slowed the car down to a crawl, and trailed him into a tavern, a big neon sign advertised as Barnstable Inn. I went in after him. My man wasn't after eats or bottle goods. He was out to make a phone call. I watched him thumb through a directory, then get into a booth. As soon as it was safe, I eased into the adjourning booth to hear what I could hear.
I must see you. At once, tonight. Well, you must come. In Burnside Park, near the front. I'll be there waiting for you.
I watched him start for the open door of the tavern. I checked the phone directory where he'd left it open and read off the name where his fingernail had left a line under it. Mrs. Verna Talbot, it said. 2580 Marydale Drive. A guy risen from the dead was dating a woman. I was right there in Burnside Park in a grandstand seat behind a row of bushes when they met. My man was hanging off to his side as if he wasn't really meeting the woman, but ambushing her. I could hear her high heels clicking toward him. Hello, Mary.
Look, Mary. You're calling me Mary?
Yeah.
You're not who you said you were on the telephone.
No, I'm not. It was a ruse to get you to come. I'll come out of the shadows so you can see my face. Well,
Your face is chalk.
it's a dead face.
And your eyes.
They're dead eyes, Mary. I've been dead, but I've come back. I've come back to claim you, Mary. Mary, my wife.
Oh, you're insane. I'm not your Mary or your wife. I don't even know you. Let me go. Help!
He wasn't just claiming her, he was strangling her. I got busy. Let go of her, mister. Suppose we postpone introductions for later. He might have been risen from the dead, but he reacted to the old one, too, like anybody else. He was out cold, stiff, like rigor mortis had come back. While he slept it off, I revived the dame and questioned her. I'm Barrie Craig, an investigator, madam. I'd like a few honest facts and no ad-libbing. Remember, I probably just saved your life.
I'm grateful. The man is insane.
You acted as if you didn't know him.
I never saw him before in my life.
He's allegedly a Remo Torch.
He said he'd come back from the dead.
So far as we know right now, could be. If you don't know the man at all, why did you agree to meet him here?
He telephoned me and said he was Tom Avery. I've known a Tom Avery.
Your name is Mrs. Verna Talbot?
Why, yes. How did you know?
Never mind how. You live with your husband?
Yes, I do. But he mustn't know I came here to meet Tom Avery.
Jealous?
Yes. We get along badly, my husband and I. We're together, but we live separate lives.
Oh.
May I please go now?
Sure. I don't see why not. I watched her melt into the night, half mink, half woman. Then I sat down to rest up, take stock, and wait. I'd sure found myself a bright way of making a living. There I was in a public park at 2 a.m., waiting for a corpse to rise for the second time in one night. This time out of dreamland. Remo Torch, or whoever he really was, slowly came out of the dreamland I'd rocked him into. He got up on his feet, rubbing his jaw where I'd clipped him. With a wild gleam in his eye and his teeth showing, as if he were getting set to jump me, I threw a gun on him fast. Don't try anything, Torch, or I'll prove to you that dead men bleed. Gonna do what I say, nice and cooperatively?
I'll do what you say.
My car's outside the park. We'll get into it and drive to my apartment.
To your apartment?
For a heart-to-heart talk. Shake your head and I turn you over to the cops. It's all the choice you've got right now, me or the cops.
I'll go with you.
got him home with me okay and put him to bed. When he fell asleep, I handcuffed him to the bed and tied his feet. Then I showered and waited for daylight and a good morning chat with Lieutenant Trav Rogers at Willie's Coffee Pot.
I don't get half of what you told me, Craig.
Half's enough to hold you for now. Feed ghost stories to little boys a spoonful at a time, an old teacher of mine used to say. Just you run down a few items I asked, huh, pal?
You want me to find out when Mary Torch died?
And who signed the death certificate, and where was she buried? Phone me the minute you know.
Craig.
Yeah?
Being your blind helper, just how did I get so degraded?
The coffee's my treat. Have yourself a second cup, chum. Torch was wide awake when I got back from Trav Rogers. I untied his feet but kept the handcuffs on. All recovered from your busy night, Torch?
What do you want with me?
I'll settle for the story of your life.
I can only remember the story of my death. I died August 28, 1951.
Okay, I'll play straight man. Go ahead and tell me the story of your death.
My last day alive was a Friday. After breakfast, I left home and my wife, Mary, to take a subway train downtown. In the subway, the express platform was crowded, as it always was. But waiting for my train, I could feel one man closest to me.
Why this one man?
He went everywhere I went.
What did he look like?
Seeing him was like looking into a mirror and seeing myself.
He resembled you?
This man who was always behind me was a man with my face.
Oh, go on.
He was behind me, this man with my face. A train was coming in. I heard its warning sound, and then I saw it come at me, hissing like an iron dragon with enormous eyes that held me spellbound. I tried to push back, but hands threw me forward into the jaws of the iron dragon. No! That's how I died, August 28th, 3 months ago. You don't believe the story of my death?
When I do, peddle me to Bellevue. That's how you were supposed to have died August the 28th last. That's the phony story in the Trans-Southern insurance files. You were supposed to have died like that, Torch, only you didn't. Somebody else did.
Somebody else did?
Yeah. The patsy whose remains were identified as Remo Torch. The poor devil who was really in that coffin you supposedly stepped out of last night. Excuse me. Barrie Craig speaking.
Barrie, this is Trav Rogers. Mary Torch died a month ago. A heart attack. And Eric Carter signed the death certificate. She was buried in Hillcrest Cemetery like her husband before her.
I got it. Thanks, Trav.
Can I be of any further service to you?
Yeah, you can. Send one of your boys over to my apartment. I've got a prize package I want under lock and key while I roam the world. I had the graveyard habit. There I was again at Hillcrest Cemetery, waving another court order at old caretaker Billings. This time with the name Mary Torch spelled out on it. Old Billings read the court order, sneaking a little foolish grin at me as he read.
Is to be an order, Mr. Craig?
Can you round up a couple of diggers right away? They can build Trans-Southern for the labor.
It's easy to do.
For a guy hoodooed by the risen dead last night, you're looking mighty cheerful today. I'll bet a tombstone you solved the mystery of the empty coffin for yourself.
You're a discerning man, Mr. Craig.
You found a body somewhere. The body the real Remo Torch sneaked out of that coffin before he got into it. In time for you to come along and get an eyeful. I'm right, huh?
You're right. And I'm a foolish old man.
Where'd you find the body that was buried as Remo Torch?
Not 20 feet from where we're standing.
Show me.
Right here, by those flower beds it was. Very shallow. Flowers had been tramped on, and I went to investigate. I saw the dirt had been turned over fresh, and then I noticed a foot. A foot sticking...
Cut. Leave something to my imagination. Now go round up those diggers. The slab of marble read Mary Torch. Two beefy gents were digging her up. They wore a look on their kisses that said they just loved to make an argument of it. they were the same team who buried the Mary Torch coffin only a month ago. To them, I was some creep undoing a work of art. Me and my court order. You've got the coffin exposed enough, men. Now use the crowbar on it. I soon got a look at the contents of the coffin.
No. Body, Mr. Craig. The casket's full.
Full is the word, Billings. Full of rocks. The answer to the rocks was obvious. Mary Torch's death was a phony, and ditto her burial. I found out how it was maneuvered by an entry in the cemetery record book.
It's the name of the undertaker you want?
Or whoever supervised the so-called burial.
Here it is. Mary Torch. And Eric Carter supervised the burial. Does the name mean something to you?
Does it? Eric Carter's the same joker who also signed the phony medical certificate. The great insurance swindle and how it was accomplished began to stitch into one piece. I had almost all the answers, enough answers anyhow, to parlay into a climax. Only somebody was working his own idea of a climax to Barrie Craig. I'd left Hillcrest through the big iron gates for the drive back to Manhattan. I switched on the ignition. Good thing the cemetery was convenient. It took all the fuss and bother out of my burial. The risen dead. I was getting a whack at the trick myself. I was dragging toward a light. A light no bigger than an arrowhead, waiting for me somewhere at the end of a long sleep. And bells tolling morning. Morning, the bells were saying. And wake up, Craig. Wake up.
Craig, look at me.
And the voice. The face. The face of someone I'd seen around. Trev. Rogers. How did you come to die, Trev?
I didn't. And neither did you, the miracle is. You're in Shore Park Hospital. An emergency. A time bomb hooked to your starter cable. Step on the car starter and blow yourself up.
A gimmick with whiskers.
A long gray beard. It's an old murder device. Moth-eaten, but it got you, Craig.
How bad am I?
You're one for Ripley.
I'm okay? Is that what you mean?
Just lacerations of the head and neck. Shock. You're wearing more bandages than King Tut. You're also minus an automobile.
I'll go Trans-Southern. Trev, get me out of here. I want Remo Torch back. As soon as I'm dressed, he and I are going bye-bye. I taxied Remo Torch across town to an address in my little black book, 2580 Merridale Drive. I'm reuniting you with the lady you made a scene over last night, Torch.
Yes, you.
Us. May we come in?
But...
You remember Remo Torch?
Well, yes, of course. After last night, could I forget?
I guess not. Especially since he only tried to strangle you. It'd be even harder to forget him if you were his wife.
His wife? I'm Verna Talbot. My husband is George Talbot, a manufacturer's representative.
Hooray for employment. Is your husband around?
Yes.
Introduce him to us.
Very well. George!
Yes, Verna?
This is my husband, Mr. Craig.
That's him. Him, Torch. Him who?
The man with my face. It's my murderer. My murderer.
Get this madman off me. Torch, no more of that. Let go of him. My apologies for my friend's behavior, Talbot. There does seem to be a superficial resemblance between you. Same general features, sort of.
Nonsense. This man's plainly insane.
Insane like a fox. I'd say Torch has a pretty shrewd idea of what he's up to. I'd even say he was trying to drive a couple of schemers crazy before the law caught up with them.
I don't understand a thing you're saying, Mr.
Craig.
Craig.
All Greek to you, huh? Suppose I spell it out and you see if you get the drift. Torch's wife had him marked for murder. The lady wanted to cash in his insurance and then marry her boyfriend, an Eric Carter. The boyfriend began following poor Torch around, waiting for a chance to knock him off. But Torch caught on to what was cooking and figured out a way of outsmarting the schemers. Drop the insanity post, Torch, and tell them how you did it.
I hired an unemployed bit actor to wear my clothes and play at being me.
The actor came down the steps of Torch's house every morning, stopped at the same newsstand, then went into the subway to ride to his office, as Torch would. Am I right on that, Torch?
Yeah.
The device worked. You fell for it, Talbot, because you'd never actually met Remo Torch.
Did you say I fell for it?
I said just that. You pushed a stooge hired by Torch under that train. Madam here identified what was left of the stooge and collected her $50,000. But Torch was really alive and kicking all the time. How much does it take to coax a confession out of you, Mr. Eric Carter, alias Talbot? Or you, Mrs. Torch?
We're caught, Eric.
Are we, Mary? I rather think I have our little problem very much under control. Keep your hands as they are, Craig.
No good, Carter. How far do you think a gun's going to get you?
Oh, I told you we'd lose, Eric.
Stop whining, you fool. Face it, Carter. The lady wants out. The way it's stacking, I'll bet she turns state's evidence. Now, drop that gun.
Get back, Craig.
I said drop it.
You crazy fool. Let go, my...
Whoa. When you shoot somebody, Carter, be sure you keep possession of the gun.
Craig, I didn't mean to shoot you. It was an accident in the struggle for the gun. Craig, don't shoot me.
Tit for tat. In a minute, I'm going to pass out. I don't want you on the loose when I do. Tit for tat in the leg. Just enough to make you stay put.
Craig, no.
Torch.
Yes, Craig.
Call police headquarters. Rogers. Lieutenant Trav Rogers. Wake up from a long sleep, and there's the same face in front of you, like a pinup on a wall.
Don't look now, Craig. But you're back in Shore Park Hospital. Emergency.
What's my medical complaint this time?
Bullet in your left thigh. You'll be out in a week. And limp for a month.
Oh, great.
And now that you're conscious, you want to talk.
Eric Carter masterminded the phony death and burial of Mary Torch. And also planted the time bomb.
1 minute, Craig.
Yeah?
You're forgetting you played the case very close to the vest. That you so far only told me about half of it.
Oh. That makes the conclusions I'm giving you a little puzzling.
A little incomprehensible.
How long did you say I lay over here?
A week.
Pull up a bed, Trav.
Pull up a bed?
I got a long story to tell you. As a conscientious officer of the law, I know you want to hear it. Weak as I feel, and long as the story is, I figure it will take about a week to tell. Good night, folks. See you next week.
You've been listening to William Gargan in another exciting transcribed mystery drama from the adventures of Barrie Craig, confidential investigator. Tonight's story, Ghost of a Chance, was written by John Robert. Next week, it's the strange story titled Song of Death, about which Barrie Craig has this to say.
In next week's story, Song of Death, I rescue a young lady from a fate no worse than drowning. And I meet a crack-brained songwriter whose death lyrics are murder. See you next week, folks.
Featured in the role of Mary was Fran Carlin. Barrie Craig, starring William Gargan, was under the direction of Hyman Brown. This is Don Pardo speaking. Now enjoy Meredith Wilson's Music Room on NBC.
Welcome back. Well, this one was tough to piece together, but after this particular adventure, so was Barrie Craig. Took a pretty good beating here with a car bomb and shot in the leg, which I guess makes us feel the same sympathy for him, even if he did get 10% of the money he was able to recover for the insurance company back. Well, we do have a listener comment. You mentioned on your first episode of Ideal in Crime that the man who plays it has a lead role, had a TV series. Could a few episodes of that be an extra in the future? Please say yes. Well, we've already added one episode. A few weeks, assume this is from Matthew, a few weeks behind. I've already added one episode. That was Video Theater number 17. We'll see if there's any more that we can add. Well, that'll do it for today. We'll be back tomorrow with Rogues Gallery, and next Monday, another episode of Barrie Craig. Well, before we do get started, I want to let you know about Audible. If you don't have time to read, you can still stay up on books through the power of Audible. Audible has nearly 100,000 different selections for your listening needs. From New York Times bestsellers to classics, you can enjoy a little bit of everything with Audible. You get one audiobook per month included with your membership, and then you get a 30% discount on any additional audiobooks you might want to purchase. And they also have some great audio dramas from the BBC and the Colonial Radio Theater that I think you'll enjoy as well. If you want to try Audible and get a free audiobook, go to audibletrial.com/greatdetectives. That's audibletrial.com/greatdetectives. Now it's time for today's episode, The Triangle Murder Case.
The F.W. Fitch Company, makers of Fitch's saponified coconut oil shampoo and Fitch's shaving creams, presents Dick Powell as Private Investigator Richard Rogue in Rogue's Gallery.
Rogue speaking. You know, there's something about me that is to trouble what molasses is to flies. I never go around looking for trouble. Trouble goes around looking for me. Now, take that afternoon a few months ago when I walked into the press room of the Hall of Justice and found, among others, Clark Ames, the young City Hall reporter for the Chronicle, expounding on his favorite subject, a deep hatred for a man named Fred Curtis, nicknamed the Alibi Master. Ames and the other newspaper men had watched Curtis win acquittals for a dozen different clients, and always by the same route: unbreakable alibis. This made the clients very happy and the district attorney very miserable. The Chronicle, a crusading newspaper, had, at the instigation of Clark Ames, been running an anti-Curtis campaign, bordering pretty close on libel. And Curtis, who was sharper than a razor's edge and harder to catch up with on the horizon, hated Ames with a wonderful passion. Curtis had won the last round, and Ames was telling me about it.
So Curtis goes to Williams, my managing editor, and threatens a libel suit. Well, I had gone a little overboard, I guess. And Williams had to let me go. Temporary layoff until the heat died down. But now I'm back on the job, Rogue, and I'm solid. And you wait until that phony Curtis sees me sitting here. Wait till he finds out I'm back on the job. Huh?
Look, Ames, I've been around this town for a while, and if I'm picking out a guy to buck, it won't be Fred Curtis. Huh? How come you decided to make a career of locking horns with the smartest mouthpiece in the business? How do you expect to win?
Oh, don't worry about it, Rogue. I got that phony right where I want him. You wait a couple of days, that's all. Mr. Alibi Master Curtis is going to be nailed to the Chronicle's masthead.
Hello, Ames. Did I hear you taking my name in vain?
Could be.
How uninteresting. What are you doing sitting around in the press room? It's reserved for the working press. Hello, Rogue.
How's your trial going, Curtis?
Oh, my client will have dinner at home tonight. Jury just retired.
Your client is guilty as the devil, Curtis. What's his alibi this time?
Now you know he couldn't have committed the crime. I've just proved to the jury that he was in San Francisco at the time the murder was committed. How are you getting along on your unemployment insurance, Ames? It was a pleasure getting you fired.
Too bad it didn't last. Well, I'm back on the job, which means I'm right back on your trail. That's bad news for you, Curtis.
Do me a favor, will you, Ames? When you call in the report of the not guilty verdict the jury's about to bring in for my client, tell your stupid managing editor I'm filing a libel action against him the first thing in the morning.
Look, Curtis, let's go in the courtroom, will you? I'm going to be there when the jury comes in.
Okay, Rogue. Oh, here, Ames. Here's $10. Go get a haircut, will you, kid? And have your suit pressed. And don't forget to spell my name correctly when you phone that story in.
Here's your 10 right in your face, Curtis. I'll see that your name is spelled right. In the biggest type in the shop, right at the top of the page when you're tried for falsifying evidence. And that's going to happen to you awfully soon, wise guy.
Here. Take it easy, Ames.
Oh, let him talk.
Let me give you something to kick around in that warped mind of yours, Curtis. You remember a guy named Don Thompson? Your alibi witness for Ed Harris a year ago. I'm sure you remember Thompson.
What about him?
Would it put a crimp in that famous poise of yours if you knew that Thompson had given the Chronicle a signed and witnessed statement admitting that he had perjured himself in that alibi statement for Harris?
That is preposterous.
Is it? Well, you'd be in quite a spot if the Chronicle happened to have a statement like that, wouldn't you, Curtis? A statement that swears that you paid Don Thompson $1,000 for the perjured testimony that kept Ed Harris out of the gas chamber? That'd sure stop your clock, wouldn't it?
Have you been drinking, Ames? You sound even a little more illogical than usual.
Oh, that's right. You like logic, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Well, figure this one out. I've been trying for some time to get convicting evidence on you. You got me fired for trying. The Chronicle was scared of a libel suit. But all of a sudden, my managing editor, Williams, doesn't seem to be very afraid of your suing the paper. Now, what could be the reason for him giving me my job back? It could be that statement from Thompson did it, couldn't it? All right, now sweat it out, Curtis. You'll be seeing your picture in the Chronicle with bars in front of you and a number on your chest in about 48 hours. Not even one of your phony alibis can keep you out of this rap, big shot.
I suppose I should be annoyed by such juvenile threats, but I just don't seem to be able to take you seriously, Ames. And the next time I give you my attention, you'll never work on a newspaper again. Coming with me, Rogue?
No, not now, no. I think I'll stay here and use the telephone. You could see and feel the hate that hung in the air in that press room like a cloud of poison gas after Fred Curtis left. Clark Ames went all to pieces as soon as we were alone, paced the floor, said he'd talk too much. He was as worried as a man with a 3-horse parlay and 2 winners. Pretty soon, though, he left, and I used the telephone to call a couple of girls I know. They weren't home. I was about to give up and go to dinner by myself when I turned around and saw Betty Callahan standing there behind me, looking like $1 million, which is a nice figure, which is what she has, if you know what I mean. Betty had a funny little quizzical smile on her face.
Hello, Richard. What's the matter? Aren't you having any luck?
Well, honey, I was just going to call you.
You mean that if Alice isn't home and Liza doesn't answer, I'm next in line?
Oh, now, you know better than that. You're always first on my list.
Remember, Richard, I was standing here when you were phoning.
Sure. I was just trying to get a substitute, that's all.
Uh-huh. Well, what do you want? The names of some girls and a few phone numbers?
Now, don't look at me like that, Betty. The only reason I was calling those other girls was because I couldn't find you.
Well, I'll forgive you if you'll take me to dinner and then to the theater to see Tallulah Bankhead.
Oh, my goodness, you have such expensive taste.
Oh, really, my dear man. I have something infinitely better. I have 2 passes for the show.
Well, good. I've got 2 passes for the drive-in. Come on, I want to see if I can walk through that door without eating the jam off of it. I'm hungry.
So am I. That's the only reason you have a date with me tonight, Richard.
Well, then come on. All through that hamburger, I kept dividing my thoughts between how such a little girl could eat so much food and that scene in the press room at the Hall of Justice. I knew Fred Curtis for what he really was, cold-blooded and completely ruthless. I remember that look in his eyes as he left the press room. A little puzzlement, a little fear, and a great deal of malice. Even if nobody else believed the story Ames told, I was sure that Curtis more than half believed it. And that meant trouble for somebody. Betty and I finished our dinner at last, and in spite of everything she could eat, I still had money enough to pay for it and a cab to the theater. We were just back in our seats after the second act intermission when I heard my name being paged.
If Richard Rogue is in the audience, will he please report to the lobby? Mr. Richard Rogue, please report to the lobby.
Isn't that a sort of obvious piece of publicity, Richard?
Well, how the devil did anybody know I was here?
You better go see what's so important. But you hurry back.
I'll be right back, baby. I had a bad hunch as I walked up that aisle. Those little chills that always race up and down my spine when I'm walking into trouble were acting up. I didn't know what to expect as I walked out into the lobby. Then I saw Clark Ames standing there. His face was as white as a dove's wing, and his eyes had the strained look that is the aftermath of seeing violent death.
Rogue.
Yeah, what's the matter, Ames? You look like you've seen a ghost.
I've seen something worse, Rogue. You got to come down to the Chronicle with me.
Now, get a hold of yourself. You're shaking like a dice cup. What's the matter?
Williams, my managing editor, was just killed.
Huh?
Murdered in his office.
Well, that's the beginning of our story. We'll continue in just a moment, but first, here's Jim Doyle.
Romance and soft feminine glamour are back in style. Women are taking off the bandanas they donned in war plants and are again letting their hair reflect moonbeams and stardust. That's why Fitch's saponified coconut oil shampoo is in more demand now than ever. Because Fitch's saponified shampoo brings out the radiant beauty of your hair. Its fragrant, creamy lather cleanses so thoroughly and rinses out so completely. Fitch's saponified shampoo contains its own patented rinsing agent, so no special after rinse is needed. And best of all, you can wash your hair as often as you like with Fitch's saponified shampoo, and it will never become dry or harsh feeling. That's because this shampoo is made from pure, natural oils that keep your hair ever soft and lustrous. Ask for Fitch's saponified shampoo the next time you're at your beauty shop, or buy an economical bottle at your drug or toilet goods counter. And now we return to Dick Powell as Private Investigator Richard Rogue in Rogue's Gallery.
Well, I was working. The publisher of the Chronicle was paying me $1,000 for putting the long, cold finger on the murder of Williams, the managing editor. I was pretty sure I knew who the murderer was, so it looked like a soft buck. When Ames and I arrived at the Chronicle, homicide was already there. My friendly enemy, Lieutenant Urban, was in charge, as usual. He walked over from where he was examining the remains of the late Mr. Williams.
Hey, Sam, help me with this.
What are you doing here, Rogue?
Now, Urban, you know whenever anything comes along you boys can't handle, they always send for me.
Who's paying you?
The publisher of this paper. Now, shall we go on with the third degree, or shall we get to work on the murder?
What do you know about it?
More than you do. When was he killed?
The medical examiner says he got it about 2 hours ago.
Stabbed to death with his own copy shears, huh?
Yeah, the last edition had already gone in. No one else was in the city room when it happened.
Found a motive?
Well, look at the office. Every file's been emptied. The murderer was looking for something, Rogie.
Yeah, I wonder if he found it.
You wouldn't know what it was, would you?
Yeah, I might. I might at that. I heard the Chronicle had a signed confession from Don Thompson. They were going to run it tomorrow.
Now, what was Thompson's confession? Come on, Rogue. You might as well give me all of it.
Well, it seemed Thompson was confessing that he had been paid quite a sum of money for a job of perjury by Fred Curtis, commonly known as the alibi master. In words of one syllable, so you can understand it, Urban, Thompson sold the Chronicle information which would have put Curtis away for about 10 years.
Curtis, eh? Well, looks like this is going to be a simple case.
Could be, yes. Hey, Ames, you know where Williams kept that Thompson confession?
It was in the top drawer of this file. It's gone.
Uh-huh. Well, I guess that settles that, Urban.
That's too easy. Curtis knows every trick in the book.
Hello, Urban. May I come in?
Yeah. We were just talking about you, Curtis. You're very welcome.
I figured I would be.
Why did you kill him, Curtis? You knew you'd be the number one on the suspect parade.
Oh, that's not very smart, Rogue. If I had killed him, I would have been much more clever about it. I wasn't within 100 miles of here when he was killed.
Well, that sounds familiar.
I know I'm wasting my time asking this, Curtis, but you can prove that alibi, can't you?
Of course. I was on my ranch in Antelope Valley when I heard over the radio that Williams had been killed. I suppose my friend Rogue has told you of the fantastic story a drunken reporter named Ames was shouting in the press room at the Hall of Justice today.
Yeah, I told him. He knows all about it. Oh, incidentally, Thompson's little composition is missing. The man who killed Williams lifted it. Very convenient for you, wasn't it, Curtis?
Convenient? Oh, there never was such a confession. There couldn't have been. Because there wasn't the slightest background of truth for the wild tale Ames told today.
Okay, Curtis. We'll let you know what we think of the story after we've checked your alibi. You were on your ranch in Antelope Valley when you heard the report of William's death.
Yes.
That's about 100 miles from here, right?
Approximately. As soon as I heard the report of the death, I knew I would be a suspect. So I started to town. I stopped in a bar in Palmdale for a drink on the way in and then came directly to the Chronicle office without stopping. My car's at the curb now in front of the building.
Ryan, check those alibis.
Oh, they'll check, Lieutenant.
I'm sure they will. The alibi master would never slip up on his own alibi.
That's right. I'm sorry to disappoint you, Rogue.
And I'm sorry to be disappointed, Curtis. You sure you don't know anything about this murder? You didn't hire someone to do it for you, did you?
Of course not. I had nothing against the man. Why should I want to kill him?
You can go, Curtis. We'll try to break that alibi or find the boy you hired. Until we do, take it easy.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Oh, you can reach me at my office if I can be of any further use to you.
Oh, Curtis, are you going back toward the Biltmore Theater?
Mm-hmm.
I got to get back there. I left my car there. And, oh, brother, Betty. Ooh, she'll massacre me.
I'll give you a lift. Come on, Rogue.
This Curtis guy was strictly the deluxe type. His car was a long, sleek black job a few sizes smaller than the Queen Mary, but with approximately the same amount of power. We got in. Curtis turned on the ignition, and the gas gauge swept clear across to full. Curtis had said he drove directly from the bar in Palmdale to the Chronicle office without stopping. About 70 miles. Mr. Curtis's carefully planned alibi was not so carefully planned. I was enjoying a short ride with a murderer. He saw my eyes on the gasoline gauge, followed them with his own, and then put his hand in his coat pocket. I knew there was a gun in it. As we drove away from the curb, I picked up a copy of the Chronicle, which had been lying in the seat beside me. I thought perhaps if I could hide my thoughts a little better, if I pretended a great nonchalance, no part of which I felt. Curtis was not sure that I'd attached the proper importance to the story the gas gauge told. He was being nonchalant, too. I had a little dough riding on Prevaricator 7th today. When I came out.
Ought to be in that paper. Final results.
Where'd you get it?
I bought it in Palmdale.
Then? This is the Bulldog edition.
Oh.
The Bulldog edition is sold only on the streets in Los Angeles.
Yeah, that's right. I'm afraid I made a mistake, huh, Rowan?
Yes, I'm afraid you made two of them, Curtis. This paper and that full gas tank. You didn't drive 70 miles in this gas eater without stopping and arrive here with a full tank, did you?
You're very observant. Looks like you're cracking my alibi, huh?
You killed Williams, didn't you?
Yes, I had to. I had to get that confession of Thompson's. It would have ruined me. I owe that impetuous reporter a great debt for tipping me off to the Chronicle's plans for crucifying me.
You, have any plans for me?
Yes. Yes, I think I have it worked out. I'm going to drive you out to the suburbs to a spot I know that's probably deserted by this time. Now, if you were found there, shot...
Aren't you overlooking something? If I'm found there, shot, Urban is going to pick you up fast. You're going to do better than that, Curtis.
Well, if there were signs of a struggle and your wristwatch had been set an hour ahead and smashed to set the time of death, and I was at Lincoln Heights Jail talking to a client at the time the police would figure the murder took place, that might do it, don't you think, Rode?
No. It's no good, Curtis. You're slipping. In the first place, there's always the possibility that a shot would be heard.
The district I have in mind is deserted by now, or will be before I consummate my plan.
And Urban is no fool. He'll be awfully suspicious. Might give you the paraffin test on your gun hand. You know, I don't think you're going to handle the situation that way, Curtis. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be kind of hard to handle, even for you.
You know, Rogue, it's amazing how fascinating crime, I mean the actual act of committing a crime, can be. Have you ever killed anybody?
No. Now, look, Curtis, I suppose you know that you're going to get caught.
I know nothing of the kind. Successful crime is nothing more than planning, careful planning. Oh, I'll grant you, Rogue, that I'm going to be suspected of your murder. But I'll never be convicted for it. I won't take any chances.
You're wrong, Curtis. You talk like a sick man. You can't beat the law. If you commit a crime, you're going to pay for it.
Let's go down to police headquarters and talk this thing over with Urban. What do you have to win by adding another murder to your score?
Mr. Rogue, I love life too much, and I love success too much to let anything stand in the way of my life as I live it. You just can't understand that, can you? You think that a man of my background and position must be horrified at the thought of taking the life of another human being. Well, you're wrong, Rogue. I have my own code, my own ethics. You know and I know hundreds of reputable businessmen in this town who spend their days and nights, their lives, grasping for money, for power over the lives of more and more people. Well, when one of them wrecks another man's life for his business, it amounts to a victory, which is celebrated by the wrecker at his club that evening. If the victim commits suicide, and he often does, they're sorry. That's all. It's just business.
What are you trying to prove, Curtis?
I'm explaining why I killed Williams. Why I have to make sure that you and the knowledge you have of my affairs are disposed of. It's a matter of business, Rogue.
No, you're crazier than a coot. You know that, Curtis. You're not talking like a rational person. You're going to pay for this crime.
Don't move. Put your hands back in your lap. I think you know that I won't hesitate to kill you here on the road if it becomes necessary. Set your watch up an hour. 1 hour, Mr. Rogue.
Okay. You got a new plan?
Yeah. We're on the outskirts of town. I'm going to stop the car when I come to an advantageous place. Then I'm going to knock you unconscious with a tire iron, smash your watch, throw you onto the road and run over you. To all appearances, your murder will be the result of a hit-and-run accident. I will have an alibi which will make it impossible for me to have been in the vicinity at the time of the accident. That, I think, is a perfect plan.
It's full of holes. In the first place, Urban will check the tread on your tires, and in the second, he'll never fall for that smash watch trick. You'll never get away with it, Curtis. You've been buying up juries and alibis and evidence for so long that you forgot that they're honest people. People who can't be bought. Urban's one of them. He'll stay with you until he gets you for killing me, Curtis. Now, you'll have to come up with a much cleverer scheme than what you've thought of so far.
Maybe you're right, Rogue.
What are you doing?
What I'm going to do now, Mr. Rogue, won't need any alibi.
Look out, you fool. Curtis! Curtis! Give me that wheel!
Sit back there, Rogue.
Get your foot off that accelerator. You're going to hit... Turn that wheel! Give me that wheel, Curtis!
Goodbye, Mr. Rogue. Let go of that wheel. Let go or I'll shoot!
We'll continue in just a moment. But now, here's Jim Doyle.
Time is a valuable thing these days, and no man wants to spend any more of it than possible on shaving. So you busy men who want to cut down on your shaving time, use Fitch's No Brush Shaving Cream. This swell cream gives you a close, comfortable shave in a hurry. It's an expert blend of 3 important shaving ingredients. These ingredients enable your razor to fairly sail along without nicking or scraping. The creamy, non-greasy texture of Fitch's No Brush saves you time, too, for it won't clog your razor or the drain. And with all your speed in shaving, you'll find that Fitch's No Brush leaves your face feeling smooth and cool.
You men who prefer a lather cream will find Fitch's Brush Cream also gives quick, comfortable shaves. It makes lots of rich lather that stays moist all during the shave, then rinses off easily.
Both Fitch's Brush and Fitch's No Brush shaving creams come in generous 25 and 50-cent sizes. For shaving speed and shaving ease, switch to Fitch. Now back to Dick Powell as Richard Rogue in Rogue's Gallery.
When I saw what that madman Curtis was going to do, I knew I had nothing to lose. He had that big, powerful car wide open and heading straight for a stone wall. I tried to grab the wheel and turn it. He fired at me just as we crashed into the wall. I only remembered turning the wheel enough to deflect the shock a little. Then I was on cloud number 8. Hugo was there, waiting for me.
Hello, Chief. You had a close call there.
Hey, Hugo, where have you been?
Well, I had a little trouble with the OPA about Cloud 8, and I had to go and see them.
Oh.
Then I had a tough time getting a reservation back. But I'm glad to see you, Rogie, with your usual bump on the head.
Am I dead?
Only the good die young, Rogie. Hey, you got company. An old friend of yours is up here. Look, over on Cloud 9. See him?
Oh, Curtis. He isn't dead either, huh?
Oh, no. But I sure thought I was out of a job when I saw you slamming into that wall, Rogie. You ought to take better care of yourself. For me.
Yeah. Look, I gotta get out of here, Yugor. How badly am I hurt?
Oh, you're okay. That car was built to take it. You won't be playing any gin rummy for a while, and you can't collect on your insurance.
Give me a little boost over the side. Will you, Yugor? I gotta get downstairs before Curtis does.
Sure, Chief. Here you go. So long, Rogie.
Rogie? Rogie? Hello, Irvin. Fancy meeting you here. Receiving hospital?
Yeah. What have you been up to? What were you trying to do? Kill yourself?
No. Is Curtis here?
Yeah. Now, I'll ask the questions. What happened?
How badly is Curtis hurt?
Leg broken, that's all. He's still unconscious.
Look, Irvin, he killed Williams. He tried to kill me.
He admitted it, eh?
Yeah, after I caught a couple of flaws in his alibi.
You got enough dope on him to make it stick?
I don't know. It would be my word against his. But I got an idea. An idea that might cinch the deal.
Every once in a while, you do have a good one.
Get the chief surgeon over here, will you? I'm going to need his help.
Okay. Here. Lie down there. I don't want anything to happen to you, Rogie. I was worried about you. You're such a pest, I'd miss you like the devil. I'll get the doc.
When I outlined my scheme to the chief surgeon, he looked for a minute like he might call in the head of the psychiatric ward. But with Urban's help, I finally got him to agree to play it my way. He bandaged Curtis from head to foot, put constricting straps across his chest, and cinched him down like a saddle on an outlaw horse. Then they put him in an oxygen tent and brought him out of shock. Urban pulled out all of the stops as he stood by the side of the hospital bed and talked to the murderer, like a father.
Curtis, can you hear me?
Yes. Who is it?
Lieutenant Urban. Did the doctor give you the bad news yet?
Yeah. Crushed chest. Nothing they can do, I guess.
No. You haven't got long to live. Anything you want to tell me? Might as well go with a clear conscience. Did you kill Williams?
Yeah. Yeah, I killed him. I had to do it. I killed him.
Well, that was the end of the case. Brilliant piece of work on my part, I thought. Going through that little tableau of making Curtis believe he was on his deathbed and had nothing to lose by confessing the murder. And, I love that Urban. He's so proud of the fact that he confined his remarks to the truth when he was talking with Curtis. All he said was, "You haven't long to live." Remember? That was true enough. Curtis was executed a few months later, which proves that the theory about perfect crimes is as foolish as a sure way to beat roulette. And, Betty, well, I left her in a theater when I started out on this case. It cost me about, just about what I made, $1,000 to get her over her peeve, so I broke about even on the deal. Oh, well, you know the old saying, a fool and his money are some party. You know what I mean? This is Dick Powell again, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you enjoyed our story tonight. Ray Buffum wrote it.
Leith Stevens composed and conducted the music, and D. Engelbach produced and directed. Don't forget, you've all got a date with us next Thursday night. We have a story for you about the last time Rogue saw prison. So make a date with us, will you? Thanks for listening. And now, once again, here's Jim Doyle.
Be with us again at the same time next week. Oh, and be sure to see Dick Powell in his latest RKO picture, Cornered, at your local theater soon. Remember, tune in next Thursday, same time, same station, when you will again hear Dick Powell as Private Investigator Richard Rogue in Rogue's Gallery. Remember, if dandruff is your problem, ask for Fitch's Dandruff Remover Shampoo. It's the only shampoo made whose guarantee to remove dandruff is backed by one of the world's largest insurance firms. No other shampoo can make this statement. Ask for Fitch's Dandruff Remover Shampoo at your drug or toilet goods counter, beauty or barber shop. Fitch is spelled F-I-T-C-H.
Welcome back. To me, that whole scene in the car was perhaps the most interesting part of this episode, because it wasn't really a surprise that the attorney did it. That was, I think, fairly obvious. But the dialogue between Rogue and the murderer was interesting, particularly with Rogue expressing his confidence in the ability of the police to catch anyone who might kill him. I do wonder if that broken watch thing, if there is anyone who has committed a crime in real life and tried to use that as the basis. Maybe as we're getting more towards digital watches and iPhones and cell phones, it may make less sense now than it did back then. I wonder if anybody ever used it even as a red herring or as a murder clue of any sort. Outside of fiction, that is. Well, for those of you who have our app or a premium site, we have a very special treat for you. It is Dick Powell hosting the variety show, The Radio Hall of Fame. And that is available to you. Our app is available at either the Android, iTunes, or Amazon app stores. And you can get for $1.99, you can also get our premium site access to all the extras we do for both Great Detectives and Dragnet with a tip of $7 or more at greatdetectives.net. But that will do it for today. We'll be back tomorrow with Let George Do It. Well, before we do get started, I want to encourage you to pick up a copy of my book, Tales of the Dim Night. If you love classic superheroes of television and of the golden age, I think you will enjoy it. We have a lot of great homages and parodies. It's a great superhero comedy. I think you will have a lot of fun with it. You can pick up a copy at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other online outlets, as well as it is available for your e-readers, particularly your Kindles and your Nooks, for only $2.99. Well, now it's time for today's episode of Let George Do It. Death starts at 45.
Personal notice, danger's my stock and trade. If the job's too tough for you to handle, you got a job for me, George Valentine. Write full details.
Standard Oil Company of California, on behalf of independent Chevron gas stations and standard stations throughout the West, invites you to Let George Do It. Death begins at 45. Another adventure of George Valentine.
My dear Mr. Valentine, you have never seen my name, Wendell Mason, as a byline on stories or articles, and
Unless it's been in a garden magazine or perhaps a filler in the newspaper. You see, I am a writer, but I've never found a big enough story until now. But, Mr. Valentine, I have run across a grain of pepper in the midst of sugar, a black icicle in the midst of sunshine. In the midst of one of our most exclusive, quietest suburbs, what have I found? A criminal. One of the blackest criminals in all America. What is he doing in River Vista? Of course, he might only be visiting there, and yet, in that case, why should I, a mere observer of the scene, be struck from behind and left for dead? Oh, yes, it happened to be only this morning. Well, Mr. Valentine, that is my chance at a big story. That's for me to find out with your help.
Well, Brooksy, this is where the character said to meet him, the city limits. There's the sign across the highway.
Just about as fancy as everything else in River Vista.
And as sleepy. Some lovely homes, though, I guess, farther upstream.
I'm happy right here. Flowers and sunshine. George, look at all the trees in blossom down by the bank.
Yeah. Should have brought a radio.
Yeah.
I could listen to a ball game.
Oh, there are other things to do in the spring besides baseball, aren't there?
Crack season's getting underway.
All right, stick to business.
No, Angel, it's just that this is the craziest rendezvous point I ever heard of. And it's 2:00, like the letter said, only what do we see? Just the big outdoors, you and me.
Yes, George?
Oh, I'll look the other way.
Oh.
Coming up the path here. Hello.
Good morning. Good afternoon. It's a pleasant day, isn't it?
Yes, it certainly is.
Out for a walk, are you, you young people?
Look, my name's Valentine, and
you haven't seen any barges, have you? On the river, I mean. Freight barges.
Well, there's so many trees you can't get a view of
yes, of course. I thought perhaps you'd been further up, up by the bend, yeah? Well, there aren't any, apparently. Anyway, now. Pleasant day.
Yeah. Interesting conversation.
George, that man's awfully well dressed to be just out taking a walk in the woods or looking for barges. Hey, and look at that car he's getting into. Custom job Cadillac convertible.
Hey, now who's working too hard? Brooksy, I think you had the right idea about today in the first place. It's spring, and the heck with business. The heck with all
right, you two. Break it up.
Huh?
Go on, get out of here. Get off this property. You're trespassing.
Well, what?
Find someplace else for your smooching. Go on.
Hey, now, wait a minute, Buster.
Wait for what?
A rifle.
Yes, that's right, a rifle. Now just climb back in your car and drive someplace else.
Suppose I argue. What's down that trail anyway that makes it cough up such different kinds of people?
Such what?
That other guy. The pinstripe in the Cadillac. He wasn't exactly your general type. His fuse wasn't so short.
I don't know what you're talking about. Was there somebody else here? Who was it?
Well, we don't know. Who are you, Wendell Mason?
What's that, a gag? Now listen, both of you. The name is Tim McNeil. I'm leaving, and I want to see you get out of here first. Do it, or I promise you'll be trampled to death by cops.
McNeil's car's turned now, hasn't it? Heading into town?
I think so, George. He's going awfully fast.
Okay.
George!
Relax. We're just going back to see the birds and the bees, that's all. Trampled to death by cops, huh? We're going to find out what that guy McNeil was talking about.
A houseboat.
Sure. We parked in the wrong place before, wrong side of the sign to see it. Welcome to River Vista.
It's tied up there. There's a regular pier.
Yeah. Oh, it's a pretty fancy houseboat, Brooksy.
Yeah.
Somebody likes the good life. Here, around this side, I guess.
And somebody?
Yeah. The good death.
Who is it, George? Just lying there. Wendell Mason, it must be.
It's not Mason. Haven't you ever seen this face before? Rocco Banyan.
Rocco
yeah,
Banyan?
He's big, all right. One of the biggest criminals in America. I guess he's been dead since yesterday. Huh? Oh.
Excuse me, did I keep you waiting, Mr. Valentine? I'm your client.
What? Mason. So now you show up.
Oh, yes. It's quite a story, isn't it? I told you it was quite a story. Well, aren't you glad you came?
Banyan died from a .45.
Not from a rifle, Lieutenant Devlin?
No, .45 automatic. Here are the bullets, 2 of them.
And the examiner says he died early yesterday morning, huh? Devlin, didn't the police have any idea at all that Rocco Banyan was in this part of the country?
They did not. Why would they? None of his enterprises were out here. Midwestern boy. St. Louis, last I heard of. Oh, but they come to California to die. Sure, it's the climate.
Oh, now don't be bitter.
Why not? There's only about 10,000 people in the world who might have killed Banyan, who have a reason for killing him.
Yeah, but how many of them live in River Vista?
I know. None. This town is clean, my friend. That's the trouble. That's what makes it hard. Be right back.
Mason, come here, will you?
Of course, Mr. Valentine. I've only been waiting.
Why didn't you meet us on time? Where were you this afternoon?
Well, I told you I'd been struck on the head. I had to have the bandage changed. Here, you see, to take it.
Okay, skip it. Now, what are you doing in this burg anyway? You don't exactly look like the country club set.
Well, I was just here to do some articles, or try to, on gardens. The beautiful gardens of River Vista for the gardening magazines. But now, holy smoke, do you know that just while you've been talking, I phoned in the story? I beat the local paper by 5 minutes. My story will be sold to the wire services with a byline.
I said, what are you doing here?
2 days ago, on my way into town, I saw this man for just a moment getting off the train, and of course I recognized Banyan. Anybody would. All his publicity, it's a face you can't forget. Naturally, the idea of a story occurred to me, so I tried to locate it.
And you did yesterday morning. That's when you got slugged, or claimed you did. And the medical examiner says that's when Banyan died.
Yes, I was out here. I just walked out here. I just walked out here from the hotel, but the minute I got on the path there, well, I never even knew what hit me. A blunt instrument, the hospital said.
Hey, hold it there. Yesterday morning, eh? Valentine, this guy must have come here just when the murderer was here. Maybe it was the other end of the same .45 that parted Mason's hair.
Well, of course, that's what I deduced. I've already put that in my story.
Yeah, wouldn't you know? Say, Mason, what do you know about Tim McNeil? And watching Banyan out here, have you seen him?
Who is Tim McNeil?
Save it, Valentine. McNeil is the man who reported this thing to the police. He's also the man who owns this houseboat. The guy's supposed to be all right.
Sure, nice fella, friendly, too.
I'm only saying what I've heard. He's made some money on a bearing works, building a palace out here in River Vista and living on a houseboat in the meantime.
What did he have to say about Rocco Banyan being here on his houseboat?
That's what he won't talk about. But just to make you happy, McNeil claims he has an alibi for yesterday.
Oh, I see.
No, my friends, this case isn't going to be that simple. This is the big-time kind. If Mason could spot Banyan, then so could other people. He could have been followed all the way from St. Louis. 100 people could have come out here to call on him or been here with him. We wouldn't know about it.
Oh, yes, we would, Lieutenant. We'd know about one.
What's this?
Because I know. I was out here the night before he was killed.
Well, this story of yours gets better and better all the time.
Oh, Mr. Valentine, please. Now, I was out walking. I had just found out that Banyan was living aboard this houseboat. I was on my way back to town, and I saw someone walking down the path from the highway.
Well, for Pete's sake, who was it?
Well, he was dark. I didn't come back to see. A middle-aged man, I guessed. He's very well dressed. Oh, yes. I noticed back up on the highway the man had driven up in a Cadillac convertible. A custom job.
It's our car. Now, wasn't it clever of you to remember the license plates, Mr. Valentine?
I'd like to use your telephone, Mrs. Reed.
Hey, it's right there in the library, Lieutenant. The maid will show you.
Never mind. I'll get it. Thank you.
Well, go on. Tell me the rest of it. This is the most exciting thing I ever heard of. Imagine a murder right here in our own Sleepy Hollow. We don't know much more yet, Mrs. Reed. Oh, darling, you do too.
We hope you do, Mrs. Reed. That's the idea coming here, you know.
But what was this Rocco Banyan doing in River Vista?
Mrs. Reed, that is a portrait of your husband up there, isn't it?
Oh, yes. Of course, Huntley's really a little fatter than that, and not quite so impressive looking.
Well, it's the same man we saw, right? And the same one who Mason saw the night before.
You say your husband's a doctor? Oh, I thought everyone knew that. There's nothing else he ever talks about. The Huntley Reed Hospital. That's what we have instead of children. But, it's very exclusive.
I can't reach him in his office, Mrs. Reed.
Well, did you try the downtown club, Lieutenant?
His nurse did. I also asked her if your husband had ever had Rocco Banyan as a patient. She asked me how long have I been crazy.
Oh, wait till the gossips get this one. Well, maybe Huntley's gone out to the country. Our other place is up the river. It's such a beautiful day. The number's right there, Lieutenant. The Riverside number.
Okay, thanks. I'll phone him.
Mrs. Reed, couldn't you just tell us in one sentence what your husband did say about Rocco Banyan?
Well, here. This is all it was. A crime story in the picture magazine. There's Banyan someplace. Oh, there, you see? Well, Huntley said he saw him. We know that. Well, we were on our way out to the country place after a party the other night, and Huntley had to stop to see a patient, some other doctor's patient. Huntley doesn't usually do that sort of emergency business at all, but he said we'd be driving past there anyway. It was somebody with an infected leg or something on one of the river barges. But did you say barge, Mrs. Reed? Yes, isn't that preposterous? It was tied up right there at that same pier. Well, anyway, I sat in the car, and Huntley went down a path, but I guess he got the wrong boat or something, because he bumped into a man and had to ask directions. Later, when he came back up, he said, guess who I saw? Rocco Banyan. Just as if he went into a drugstore and saw Hitler or somebody.
Uh-huh. I'm beginning to get the idea.
But today, your husband was out there today. Well, you said he was looking for a barge. I suppose he was just being conscientious. That's his sweetest virtue, bless him. Just paying a return call on the patient.
Yeah, maybe. And the barge wasn't there anymore.
Well, I can't imagine why else, unless it was curiosity. Or unless he's been holding out on me all these years. Dr. Huntley Reed, secret associate of the notorious Rocco Banyan. Oh, wouldn't that be wonderful? Little stuffy old River Vista suddenly jumping into the headlines with its most correct citizens. Oh, Lieutenant, now we can find out. What did Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde have to say? What's the secret, nefarious connection between my husband and...
Mrs. Reed, I only talked to a servant out there and a highway patrolman.
A what?
I'm sorry, but I'll say it fast. They just found the doctor's body out in the woods.
Oh.
Your husband's dead. He's been murdered, shot to death by a .45.
We'll return to tonight's adventure of George Valentine in just a moment. There aren't many of us who can say, tomorrow morning I'll go out and buy a brand new car, just like that. But it's so easy for you to get and keep that new car feeling with the car you're driving now. How do you do it? Just by using Chevron Supreme gasoline. Most raw gasoline contains impurities that form engine-sticking gum, and few things can rob a car of its power faster than gum. Chevron Supreme is the gasoline that's super refined to eliminate gum. Try a tankful. You'll see why we say it gives you that new car feeling. Better starting, better pickup, new power on hills, full mileage in the kind of driving you do. Ask for super refined Chevron Supreme at standard stations and independent Chevron gas stations where they say and mean we take better care of your car. Now back to tonight's adventure of George Valentine. Death begins at 45, and so far, a 45 has been the death of two men. Rocco Banyan, a big-time gangster, and Dr. Huntley Reed, the most dignified physician in the peaceful suburb of River Vista. If your name is George Valentine, you know that this one won't be easy to tie together. No more connection than between the houseboat on which Banyan was killed and the barge which Dr. Reed supposedly visited a day or two earlier. Because now the police have located that barge at the next town down the river, and the last thing it seems to carry is information.
Murder? No, that's bad. Yeah, that's too bad, really.
Read it to him, Brooksy.
All right, George. And the police have definitely proved that it was the same gun, the same caliber .45 automatic that must have been used to kill both men.
That's too bad.
Well, that's been right in the newspaper for the past half hour.
Here's the rest. According to Mrs. Reed's account, her husband only saw Rocco Banion for a short moment. As she sat in the car that night before the first murder, Dr. Reed walked down toward
How about
the pier.
that part, friend?
What
was your barge doing at that pier that night anyway?
Well, that's an easy place to tie up. You see, my leg here was infected, and it was an easy place for the deckhand to go on the shore and telephone for the doctor.
He came back to see you again a day later, and you were gone.
Sure. I got a cargo to think about, and my leg, she's better, so we go the same night.
Come on, Valentine. This is a waste of time.
No luck with the deckhand?
No possible connection here with Banion.
Another dead end.
All we do is confirm Mrs. Reed's story about her husband that night.
Yeah, I know. So there's only one thing to do, isn't there?
McNeil?
Yeah, McNeil. And Devlin, how about letting me have a try at the rising businessman by myself?
I've got an alibi, Valentine. I wasn't even out here those 2 or 3 days.
Not so perfect an alibi, McNeil. Staying in town in a hotel, partying with friends. You still might have had a chance to get out here and kill Banion.
There was somebody with me all the time.
There was what?
I said all the time, every minute.
Yeah, sure, I saw the list. You were with various respected citizens all the time. But a guy isn't normally that sociable, is he? Unless he sets it up that way. Why were you so nervous? Who'd you expect?
Nothing, I wasn't.
Why was Rocco Banion staying in your houseboat? Okay, shall I do a little guessing? Shall I talk about a rising businessman who's made a little money and come out to build a home where the rich people live?
It's a nice place out here. The climate
Notice
is
you
good.
can't take your eyes off the newspapers over there. You don't like being mixed up in all this, do you, McNeil?
Well, look at that stuff. The big-shot gangster.
And the doctor. How does he tie in? He's respectable.
How should I know? Punks who write that stuff, this beagle-nosed Mason, whoever he is.
Let's get back to Rocco Banion. Let's see what makes you so touchy about the publicity. Why are you so?
He's my brother. That's why.
Your brother?
Yeah. A brother to be proud of. To love. Haven't seen him for years, Valentine.
You saw him last week.
He just showed up in town. He knew I had the houseboat.
Why did he come?
How should I know? Take a rest, he said. He wasn't actually a fugitive or anything. What could I do?
Give him the keys and move out yourself?
If I threw him out, what would happen then? I haven't liked the guy for years. I hate him. I even changed my name not to be mixed up with him. Sure, I was with people, but it wasn't to set up any alibis. Rocco said he'd just stay a few days. He wanted to rest where it'd be quiet, where he could be alone.
Where he could be alone, huh? Alone.
Hey, wait a minute. Where are you going?
To put this together fast, McNeil.
What?
Yeah, put it together before somebody else gets hurt. Hurry up and connect me with that number, will you, operator?
Valentine, will you please?
Hello?
Hello, Mrs. Reed. This is George Valentine.
Oh, I'm so glad you called. Have you found anything?
Mrs. Reed, look, I'm in a hurry. Please listen. The other night when you were with your husband and you waited for him in your car parked under that brightly lighted sign, did you see anyone at all?
No, of course not.
Well, did your husband? Did he mention seeing anybody besides Banion?
Aside from his patient and the deckhand or whatever it was?
That's right, on the houseboat.
Let me see. I don't remember exactly. I don't think so, but... Well, Mr. Valentine, naturally, at the time, we didn't think anything was important.
All right, never mind, Mrs. Reed. I think your husband may have been killed because he saw someone besides Banion there. Or at least because that someone thought your husband saw him.
I don't understand.
Mrs. Reed, are you alone in your house now?
Well, yes. The servants went to the movies.
If your husband was killed because he'd been a witness to something, you must be on the list, too. So lock the windows, will you, lady? We're coming right out.
George.
Will you buy it, Devlin?
Yep. Only, brother, you left out something. Story in the paper.
I know.
A murderer thinks in a straight line. 1, 2. First kill Rocco Banion, then knock over the doctor because he might have seen you.
Yes, it's the only way it makes sense.
Even if the murderer didn't notice Mrs. Reed waiting in her car, this newspaper told him she might be another witness. Practically told him he'd better play safe and get rid of her, too.
Well, all right, what are we waiting for? Let's go.
Fancy spot, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess the front door's this way. So dark you can't
George,
tell.
there's somebody up there at the door.
Mrs. Reed, please.
Hey, that's Mason. Come on.
Yeah, come on. All right, Joe.
Hey, who's that? Who is that?
Got him, Devlin?
Yeah, I got it. Come on, talk now.
Mrs. Reed, open the door. Mrs. Reed.
Oh, Mr. Valentine. Mr. Valentine.
Hey, now, take it easy. You're all right.
I was...
Come on, back inside.
He's been pounding there on the door.
Is anybody else here, Mrs. Reed?
No, there wasn't. After you telephoned, I began to realize what it all meant. To realize I was in danger, too.
Here, you'd better sit down.
It didn't even occur to me. It's so simple. It explains everything. Huntley was killed because he saw it. People would think that I saw, too.
Well, you don't have to worry anymore, Mrs. Reed.
Oh, it's so hard to get used to the idea that somebody might want to kill you. You never even think such people exist.
Okay, Valentine. Here's our man.
Well, Mr. Valentine, I didn't mean
He tried to get in.
It's the stories, that's all. Just my stories.
What do you mean?
Well, Mr. Valentine, I wrote too much. I said too much in my stories. So I came out here to warn Mrs. Reed.
Now, listen, my
I
friend.
had written it. It was so obvious, and yet I hadn't seen it myself. It's been in the paper since noon. Mrs. Reed's name. About being out there with her husband that night. I was afraid my writing it might have got her killed.
You mean
Yeah,
that you...
Devlin, it's turning into a chorus, isn't it? We're all catching on at once, all solving it the same way. But all our figuring of the how and why of the murders doesn't help us with the who, does it?
No. Come on, Mason. I want to talk to you some more. In there. Hey, would you take some notes, Miss Brooks?
Oh, sure, Lieutenant. I feel a lot safer now that you're here, Mr. Valentine.
Yeah, okay. Mason had a point, don't you think, Mrs. Reed? The murderer must have seen a paper at noon.
Well?
Well, Mrs. Reed, it's nighttime now, and you've been alone and accessible a lot of the time since noon. To the murderer, that is.
Oh, don't remind me.
So if it's true that the only reason for killing respectable people is because they had the misfortune to be near Rocco Banyan once, well, then, why aren't you dead?
What? Do you always say such charming things to people?
Mrs. Reed, I know it's a shot in the dark, but why haven't you been shot in the dark in all this time? Why haven't you?
Because Mr. Banyan's little friend with the .45 has such atrocious aim, perhaps. Because he ran out of bullets. How should I know?
It was plenty good aim that killed Banyan, lady, and then killed your husband the next day.
Yes, my husband. You're being very considerate.
Sure, it was simple murder. 1-2. The big-time gangster with a few thousand enemies, and then the innocent bystander from the clean little town. Only why haven't you been killed, too?
Will you please stop? Will you
Mrs. Reed, you cooked up a murder scheme that's 50 times as cold-blooded as anything Banyan's 10,000 enemies ever could think of.
I don't know anything about Mr. Banyan. I only saw his picture in a magazine once.
Yeah, sure, you saw his picture in a magazine, all right. But your husband saw him. I guess that's what gave you the idea, wasn't it?
I'm not filled with ideas
And it would have worked so beautifully. The police could look for years for Banyan's killer. Only, why weren't you killed, too? Unless you're the murderer yourself, Mrs. Reed. Unless the whole thing is upside down. Unless it isn't a 1-2 case. No, it's very neat, very neat. This time, 2 comes first.
Rocco Banyan was killed a whole day before my husband.
In order of importance. Now, suppose you wanted to get rid of your husband. And suppose one night he happened to see a famous gangster in town. Boy, what an opportunity. At least if you're cold-blooded enough to be able to go out and just shoot that gangster.
No, I didn't. You're lying.
It made a perfect murder, didn't it? Because then you can wait until the next day and kill your husband without anyone ever guessing that the chicken came first instead of the egg.
I didn't do it. I didn't.
Okay, Mrs. Reed. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if we go looking for evidence where you never expected us to, like in places where you must have bought the gun, places where we might find your fingerprints, lots of places like that. Oh, maybe we won't find anything. I don't know. Only if I am wrong about all this, then why weren't you killed, too? Why weren't you killed, too?
I will be. now.
Mrs. Huntley Reed. Member of all the best clubs. One of the wealthiest women in River Vista. Charming hostess.
And she talked too much, Brooksy. Maybe we should have caught on earlier. I don't know. The despairing way she rattled off about her husband. And now it seems she's been wanting to kill him for years.
Oh, but George, lots of women talk that way about their husbands. It doesn't necessarily
I know they
mean...
do. That's the trouble.
What? Oh, you mean...
Well, lots of women don't, George.
Depends on the personality, I suppose.
Huh? Oh. You think I'm going to rise to that bait? You're crazy. Do you think I'm going to say I wouldn't say nasty things about you? You're crazy. If you think that... Oh, I don't know. Maybe you are sort of crazy.
If you've already discovered that new car feeling by using super refined Chevron Supreme gasoline, why not take it one easy step further for that new car look? You can't change the shape of your car, but it could be easier to keep it sparkling bright, clean, and shining. The car savers at standard stations and independent Chevron gas stations know this, and that's why they keep on hand for you Atlas Auto Wash and Atlas Auto Polish. With the Auto Wash, you just add a small quantity to water, and it quickly removes dirt and grease, oil and road film, leaves the entire surface of your car spanking clean. And with the Atlas Auto Polish, you can get your car as bright as a polished silver in just one operation. And let me remind you, besides the satisfaction you get by keeping that new car look, don't forget that when it comes time for trade-in value, the very first thing a buyer sees is that clean, brightly polished finish. Ask for these two Car Saver products tomorrow. Ask at independent Chevron gas stations and standard stations where they say and mean, we take better care of your car. Tonight's adventure of George Valentine has been brought to you by Standard Oil Company of California on behalf of independent Chevron gas stations and standard stations throughout the West. Robert Bailey is starred as George, with Virginia Gregg as Brooksy. Let George Do It is written by David Victor and Jackson Gillis and directed by Don Clark. Pat McGeehan was heard as Lieutenant Devlin, Bob Griffin as Mason, Bill Conrad as McNeil, Dara Singleton as Mrs. Reed, and Larry Dobkin as Reed. The music is composed and presented by Eddie Dunstetter. It's a fact that anyone can develop cancer, but it's a fact, too, that we're not just going to sit back and do nothing about this serious disease. Join the 1950 Cancer Crusade. Help science, help you. Mail a generous contribution today to Cancer, care of your local post office. Remember, we must all strike back. This is John Heaston reminding you that although daylight saving time will go into effect next week, you will hear Let George Do It at this same time on this same station. This is the Mutual Don Lee Broadcasting System.
Welcome back. Well, I'm usually a fan of the writing on the show, but this one, I just could not buy it. For one, to name the show after the caliber of gun used in the murders, I don't know. No, I didn't like that. But more to the point, the solution. Detectives don't always have evidence that will convict in court. And that's okay. That's part of the genre. But this one just seemed like wild speculation. He speculated that the killer must have read the newspaper article and must have considered the doctor's wife as big a threat as the doctor, and so would make a beeline back there to go ahead and kill the doctor's wife. While the theory's possibly true, it could be that a contract killer or someone who had fled the area was the one who did it, and either one, they couldn't make it back in time, or two, they didn't read into all the details of the news story on it. If there was anything that was clever about the crime, it was the caliber of gun that was used. An audience, particularly in the 1940s and 50s, would tend to not consider a woman suspect if you were dealing with a .45, because usually those are considered much bigger weapons. The traditional women's guns were usually the .25 or the .32, because they were considered lighter and more manageable. But apparently George guessed his way into a murder solution rather than into a slander lawsuit. All right, well, we do have one comment on Podcast Alley from Niffer Nurse, who says, "Great job, Adam." Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your support. We will be back tomorrow with Sherlock Holmes. And next week, another episode will let George do it. Well, before we do get started, I want to encourage you, if you've not already, to try Netflix. Netflix is a great service, provides you access to a world of great television entertainment options, including classic TV shows such as The Andy Griffith Show, the 1950s Dragnet, Mission Impossible Hawaii Five-0, as well as great movies such as The Third Man, all available through the Instant Watch library. Plus, there are more than 100,000 video titles available to watch on the DVD player. So try Netflix. That's netflix.greatdetectives.net. Start your free trial. Well, let's go ahead and we're going to take a listen to today's episode of Sherlock Holmes, Murder in the Locked Room.
Kreml Hair Tonic and Kreml Shampoo present the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes, starring Nigel Bruce as Dr. Watson and Tom Conway as Sherlock Holmes. Well, once again, it's Monday night and time for the pleasantest of all doctor's appointments, our weekly visit with that splendid host and incomparable storyteller, Dr. Watson. Good evening, Dr. Watson.
Ah, there you are, Mr. Bell. Punctual to the minute, as usual. Draw up a chair and sit down.
Thank you.
That's it.
All ready for tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure, Dr. Watson?
Yes, my boy. I was just going over my notes on the case before you arrived. It was an adventure that started off on a note of gaiety and ended in one of the most bizarre tragedies that we ever encountered. I call it Murder in the Locked Room.
This I've got to hear. But first, men, the good old summertime is here again. And after a day spent at the ballpark, on the golf links, or just loafing under the sun, does your hair look as stiff as a straw, dry, matted, and tangled? Then don't make the mistake of plastering your hair down with greasy, sticky goo. Instead, put Kreml Hair Tonic on the job. Kreml is that famous modern hair tonic, such a wonderful, natural-looking hairdressing. Kreml has just enough light oils to keep dry, stringy hair neatly groomed throughout the hottest, most humid summer day. Yet Kreml never leaves the hair looking or feeling greasy. It never leaves any unpleasant odor. Kreml always feels so clean on both hair and scalp. Kreml is able to give you all these advantages because it contains a special combination of hair grooming ingredients which is found in no other hair tonic. So men, make Kreml a daily must this summer for that handsome, clean-cut look from morn till night. Kreml, Kreml Hair Tonic. Now, Dr. Watson, how about the new Sherlock Holmes story, Murder in the Locked Room?
Well, Mr. Bell, that adventure took place many, many years ago. It began on a gray and murky afternoon in Baker Street. We just finished tea, I remember, and Holmes was busying himself with some chemical experiments. For some time he sat there in silence with his long, thin back curved over a retort in which he was brewing a particularly malodorous product. As I glanced across at him, seated there under the gaslight, his head was sunk upon his breast, and he looked like a strange, lank bird with dull gray plumage and a black topknot. Suddenly, he turned to me and spoke.
Sir Watson, you've decided not to invest in South African securities.
Huh? How on earth do you know that, Holmes?
It isn't really difficult. I observe a groove between your left forefinger and thumb.
Groove?
It is enough to tell me that you do not intend to invest your small capital in the goldfields.
I see no connection with groove.
And yet the train of thought is elementary. 1, you had chalk between your thumb and finger when you returned from your club. 2, you put chalk there when you played billiards. 3, you never play billiards except with Marston. 4, you told me about a month ago that Marston had an option on some South African property which would expire in 4 weeks and which he desired you to share with him. 5, your checkbook is locked in my drawer and you have not asked for the key. Number 6 is the logical conclusion. You've decided not to invest your money in this manner.
Absurdly simple.
I knew you'd say that.
I wonder who that is. Were you expecting a client?
No, Watson, but I hope it is one. My practice has been decidedly slack lately. Go and see who it is, will you?
Yes, of course I will. It's all right, Mrs. Hudson. I'll show the gentleman in. This way, sir. Good evening. I'm Dr. Watson.
How do you do? My name is Chudley Stoner.
Oh, come along in, Mr. Stoner.
Thank you. And this must be the great Sherlock Holmes.
My name is Holmes. The adjective is your own, Mr. Stoner. Sit down, won't you?
Thanks. I don't imagine you know anything about me, Mr. Holmes.
Nothing beyond the fact that you went to Eton and Oxford, that you have a beautiful and socially prominent wife, and that you contribute to the Strand magazine with some regularity.
I'm disappointed in not receiving one of your famous deductive analyses, Mr. Holmes, but I'm glad that my name is familiar to you.
You contribute to the Strand magazine, sir, too? That's very interesting, Mr. Stoner. Perhaps you read some of my humble efforts.
Yes, indeed, Doctor. Very colorful stories they are.
Oh, thanks very much.
If you don't mind my saying so, Mr. Stoner, your own stories, which also deal with the world of crime, seem to me to be even more sensational than Watson's.
Probably because he has the facts to work with, whereas I have to depend on my gift of imagination. But the reason I've come to you tonight, Mr. Holmes, has nothing to do with imagination. I find myself mixed up in a real-life murder that is as puzzling as any problem I've dealt with in fiction.
A murder, Mr. Stoner? I say, really, you
The
don't...
facts, please.
Well, Mr. Holmes, I'll give them to you as briefly and concisely as possible. I just got back from Paris yesterday. My secretary went with me. He did not return. The French police say he committed suicide. I know that he didn't.
Oh, how do you know that, Mr. Stoner?
The boy had everything in the world to live for. No financial worries and a very promising future ahead of him.
Please describe the circumstances under which his body was found.
Well, I'd left him alone in his room. When I came to fetch him, there was no answer to my knock. I tried to look through the keyhole, but the key was in the lock from the inside, and I could see nothing. After some time had elapsed, I got worried. A friend of mine, an inspector of the police, was dining with me that night, and he suggested we should investigate. We broke down the door. My secretary was dead, a bullet in his heart.
Inside a room, locked from the inside, huh? Obviously, the police were right in thinking that it was suicide, Mr. Stoner.
Of course, you examined the room thoroughly for traces of some other method of ingress?
Meticulously. The windows were locked tight.
No sliding panels?
None.
Where was the revolver?
Beside his right hand, one bullet gone.
When you say the key was in the inside of the door?
Yes, and that's why the police wrote it off as suicide. Mr. Holmes, how would you explain such a situation?
I'd like a few more facts before giving an opinion. You say you examined the room meticulously. Was there no oddity? Nothing out of place? Nothing peculiar in that room?
Nothing that I noticed.
Perhaps a small pellet of wax, say?
Yes, by Jove. I did find a wax pellet. It was lying on the carpet near the door, and I couldn't imagine what he was doing there.
Well, there's your answer. One more question. This French inspector who entered the room with you, what was his personal relationship with your secretary?
Odd that you should ask that. They'd quarreled the night before about some girl at the Folie Bergère.
Then there you have it, Mr. Stoner. The murderer left the room, locked the door from the outside, removed the key, and plugged the keyhole with wax. When the room was broken into, he simply slipped the key into the inside of the lock, thereby dislodging the wax pellet. Obviously, from what you've told me, only the inspector had that opportunity.
Great Scott, a French police inspector, a murderer? Holmes, what are you going to do about this?
Nothing, old chap.
Huh?
Beyond
Nothing, old chap?
wishing Mr. Stoner good luck with the editor of the Strand magazine.
I don't think I follow you, Mr. Holmes.
Oh, come now, Mr. Stoner. It's an intellectual game and, in its way, quite stimulating. But don't think you can hoodwink me so easily.
Holmes, what are you talking about?
My dear Watson, I read the papers carefully.
And what do the papers have to do with this?
I've noticed the presence of you and your lovely wife at so many social functions here in London in the past few days that I'm afraid I can't possibly accept your Paris story. The obvious answer remains, you've come to me with an imaginary problem in order to solve a difficulty in one of your stories.
Mr. Holmes, you're even smarter than I gave you credit for.
But this is disgraceful, sir. Wasting my friend's time like this.
I suppose I should apologize, Mr. Holmes. But here's the way it happened. I came home late last night, a little under the weather. I had the most wonderful idea on earth for a story. I was going to call it The Locked Room. I'm convinced I made some notes on the story last night, but when I wakened this morning, I couldn't find them. All I could remember was the problem, but I had no idea how to solve it, and so I came to you.
I see. It's an excellent idea for a story. Though I have known similar locked room problems, in fact, I don't recall that fiction has exploited their possibilities as yet.
Holmes, why are you so calm? I think it's outrageous to come here and pick your brains for a story.
My dear Watson, how else do you get the material for your own masterpieces?
That's not very funny.
Should you grudge it to him?
Well, it's not the same thing at all.
I must say you're being very sporting about it, Mr. Holmes.
Oh, no, Mr. Stoner. I'm being businesslike. May I ask how much you are in the habit of receiving for a story of yours in the Strand magazine?
About 20 guineas. Why?
I am a consulting detective, and I think I've given you a valuable opinion. My fee, if you sell your story, will be 10 guineas. Good night to you, Mr. Stoner.
There you are, Monsieur Stoner.
A remarkable deduction, Andre. Yes, here I am.
I've spent all afternoon searching for those notes on the story. I could not find any trace of them.
And yet I could swear I did some work when I came in last night. You are sure I didn't give you some dictation?
Oh, quite sure, Monsieur Stoner. If you will pardon my saying so, you were a little...
Yes, go on, Andre. Say it. The secretary has some rights. I was drunk. That's what you mean, isn't it?
Oh, I meant no offense.
It'd be rather a relief if you did. You're always so infernally polite. Where's my wife?
She's in the library with your brother-in-law, Monsieur Seal.
Very well. I'll need you after dinner, Andre. I'm going to work on the story tonight.
Yes, Monsieur Stoner.
Hello, Chad. I was beginning to worry about you not being back for dinner.
I stopped at the club.
Good evening, Chad.
Hello, Henry. And how is our master of the violin this evening?
Chad, don't make fun of my brother like that.
Yes, Chad, go easy. I can't learn the violin in 2 easy lessons, you know. Violet accompanied me on the piano just now. She says I'm improving.
I don't doubt that you're improving. You couldn't become worse.
Chad, you're intolerable. Henry's our guest.
An unwanted guest as far as I'm concerned. He's been here 2 months. Why doesn't he try and get himself a job instead of mooning around here all day scraping away at his fiddle?
That's the last time you've insulted me, Chad. I'm leaving here in the morning.
I hope I can count on it.
How dare you, Chad? How dare you? If Henry goes in the morning, I shall go with him.
Now, Violet, take it easy.
You've been drinking again, and you're disgusting when you drink. You made an absolute fool of yourself in front of Andre last night.
You're very protective about him. Are you sure those calf eyes he keeps making at you are entirely unreciprocated?
I hate you, Chad. I'm not waiting until the morning. I'm leaving tonight.
Now, wait a minute, Violet. I'm sorry. I don't know what makes me do it. I get a few drinks and I just feel that I've got to hurt you.
Well, you certainly succeed. I used to think it was the so-called artistic temperament that made you this way. Now I realize it's drink.
I'm sorry, Violet, but it's not been too easy for me. Having Henry around all day gets pretty trying, particularly when I'm attempting to work.
But he's planning to move soon anyway. Surely you can tolerate it a little longer. For our sake, Chad. Can't you?
Of course I can, Violet. I'm sorry, dear. I'll try and be a little less boorish, and I'll watch the drinking.
That sounds more like the man I married. And I'll help, too. I'll try and keep Henry out of your way as much as possible, dear.
We can make a go of it, Violet. I know we can. Well, I'm going into the study. I want to jot down some notes on the new story while they're still fresh in my mind.
All right, dear. Dinner will be in about half an hour. I'll call you.
Fine. The Locked Room. Yes, that'll be a good title. It'll be worth giving Sherlock Holmes 10 guineas for the help he gave me. Who is it? Is that you?
I'm flattered that you dropped by to see me, Inspector Lestrade. Not a business visit, I gather.
Bless you now, Mr. Holmes.
You'll have a whiskey and soda, won't you, Lestrade?
Thank you kindly, Dr. Watson. Not too much soda, if you don't mind.
The London criminal is becoming a dull dog these days, Lestrade. My own practice has been remarkably slow in the past few weeks.
Same thing with us at Scotland Yard, Mr. Holmes. But, of course, we don't grumble at that. Now, take me. I've had an easy day today. Just come from investigating a suicide in Church Street, Kensington.
Indeed, another poor devil who couldn't stand the pace of our modern living, I suppose.
I suppose so, Doctor. Though you'd have thought this bloke had everything he wanted. He was quite a successful writer, they tell me.
A writer? What was his name?
He wrote for the Strand magazine. Name was Chudley Stoner. Dr. Watson, you dropped that glass.
You say Chudley Stoner committed suicide tonight?
That's right, Mr. Holmes. You know him?
Under what circumstances was he found?
It was a routine case, sir. Locked the door on his study from the inside and then blew his brains out. The windows were locked and there were no secret panels and that kind of stuff. It was suicide, all right.
The arm of coincidence is long indeed, but not as long as that. Has the body been moved?
Oh, no, Mr. Holmes. I told him to touch nothing until the police photographers got there. Just to be on the safe side, you understand, sir?
Splendid. Grab your coat and hat, Watson.
Right, your Holmes.
But what's all the excitement, Mr. Holmes? It's just a suicide.
Nonsense, Inspector. I'll stake my whole reputation that Chudley Stoner has been the victim of a murder plot, as cunning and diabolical as any that I've ever encountered.
In just a moment, we'll find out if Sherlock Holmes is correct in deducing that this is murder. Are you one of the many men who find it difficult to keep your hair neatly groomed in summer? Does the burning sun bake and scorch your hair, making it look messy and not the least attractive? Then try Kreml Hair Tonic. Just notice the amazing change in the appearance of your hair. You see, Kreml does lots more than just keep your hair looking handsome. This highly specialized hair tonic gives you your money's worth. It contains a unique combination of hair grooming ingredients which is found in no other hair tonic. Kreml is simply great to lubricate a dry scalp. And if the sun dries your hair so that it breaks off and falls, Kreml helps condition the hair in that it leaves it feeling so much softer, more pliable when you comb it. At the same time, Kreml removes itchy, loose dandruff and leaves the scalp feeling so cool, refreshed, and alive. Be smart, men. Buy a bottle of Kreml at any drug counter. Ask for an application at your barber shop. Use Kreml daily for better groomed hair, a more hygienic scalp. Kreml, Kreml Hair Tonic. Well, Dr. Watson, this is really one for the book. A mystery writer comes to Sherlock Holmes with a fictitious murder plot. Holmes solves it for him, then the man goes away and gets murdered in exactly the way he described.
Precisely, Mr. Bell. As provocative a problem as ever we encountered.
I bet you hurried off to the dead man's house at once, didn't you?
As fast as a hansom cab could take us there. As soon as we arrived, we cross-examined the three members of the household. The dead man's wife, Violet, her brother, Henry Seal, and Andre Leroux, the secretary. All of them told the same story. That they'd heard the shot and hastened to the room from different parts of the house. They said that they looked through the keyhole, found it was blocked, and then the two men broke down the door.
Just the same story as in the dead man's fictional problem, wasn't it? What happened next, Dr. Watson?
Well, before we talked to the three suspects any further, Holmes, Inspector Lestrade, and I walked into the dead man's study to examine the body. I can almost hear Holmes now. As he said...
It's not hard to find a motive. A beautiful wife, a worthless brother who'd been told to get out, an attractive and attentive young French secretary who hated the dead man's cruelty.
Blimey. And I called it just a routine suicide.
You'll notice that no wax pellet is in evidence this time. I'd say that the answer is obvious. The dead man did write some notes on his story last night. The killer found them and realized that he'd been presented with a perfect murder method, never expecting that the dead man would divulge his method to me.
Mr. Holmes, why are you examining the keyhole of the door?
I was looking for a pellet of wax, Inspector. It's missing. Obviously, the murderer had read about that in the dead man's notes and was clever enough to remove it. But let's examine the corpse. Interesting. Most interesting.
Why, Holmes?
Well, surely you can see for yourself, Watson. The bloodstains clearly indicate that the man fell here, some 5 or 6 feet from the desk. And yet, with a dying burst of energy, he crawled towards the desk and clutched it. Undoubtedly, he was trying to give us a dying message.
But how can holding on to a desk give a message, Mr. Holmes? And why should a dying man try to do that anyway?
Remember that the dead man was a writer and a student of criminology. In his last few moments of consciousness, he probably realized I'd be on the track of his murderer.
He gave us more than one clue, Holmes. Look at his body. As he fell for the last time, he upset that bowl of violets. And his wife's name is Violet.
Coincidence, I think, Watson. The flowers were knocked over inadvertently as he fell. But the move to the desk was a deliberate and desperate effort.
Well, if you talk about that, look here, gentlemen. Lying by his right arm. Look, that was knocked off the desk, too.
It's a seal with a monogram on it.
Right, Doctor. And Seal is the name of the dead man's brother-in-law. Henry Seal.
Interesting, but I refuse to believe that a dying man could deliberately knock over such a comprehensive number of incriminating objects as he died.
Then who do you suppose did do it, Holmes?
At this stage of the case, I shall suppose nothing, Watson. We have 3 obvious suspects waiting for us. Let's question them.
I don't know why they want us here. I know nothing
Quiet,
about it.
please. Mr. Holmes wants to ask you some questions.
No, Inspector. I only wish to ask them one question. You, Mrs. Stoner, how did you occupy your time while you were waiting for the police to arrive?
I was so nervous that to try to calm myself, I did some knitting. I do quite a lot of knitting for the Coast Guard men, you know.
I see. And you, Mr. Seal? What were your movements before the police arrived?
I sat in the library, Mr. Holmes, playing solitaire.
And you, Andre?
I went to my room and worked on my account books. I realized that my job here was finished, and I thought I would get my books in order.
I see. That's all for now, thank you.
Come along, Henry.
Lestrade.
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
I'd like you to get me those 3 objects spoken of. The knitting, the cards, and the account books.
Right you are, Mr. Holmes.
I don't see that you found out much there, Holmes.
Don't you, Watson? I'd have thought my line of reasoning was obvious.
What are you doing? Kneading at that keyhole. You said that this time the pellet of wax had been removed.
True, Watson. But even though the pellet's been removed, I'm quite sure there'll be traces of wax inside the keyhole. And there are. Splendid. I shall remove this lock and take it back to Baker Street. The murderer undoubtedly still had some traces of wax on his fingers. A closer examination of the fragments of wax inside this keyhole and an equally close examination of the knitting, the cards, and the account books should be able to give us the solution to this case.
Well, Holmes, you've been poring over the microscope for nearly an hour. Have you got the answer?
Nearly, but not quite.
But you've examined all 3 of the objects. Surely it's just a question of finding which one of them shows traces of wax.
Oh, no, old chap.
Huh?
It's not as easy as that. Oddly enough, the knitting, the pack of cards, and the account books all show traces of wax.
Great Scott. But that means that all those people were involved in the murder. It was a concerted plan between the 3 of them.
I think not, Watson.
What?
And in 5 more minutes, I'm sure I can prove to you who the murderer is.
Violet, why are you sitting alone here in the library?
Oh, hello, Andre. I'm so upset. They think the Chud was murdered. The inspector's still questioning Henry. I believe they think he did it. Oh, it's awful. Oh.
Oh, now, don't worry, darling. Everything is going to be all right.
Please, Andre. The Chud's body hardly cold.
But surely now that he is dead, you always made me believe that if he were dead, we could be together, darling.
I was insane. I thought he was neglecting me, that perhaps there was some other woman. But just before he died, we had a talk. I knew it was going to be all right again.
But me? You mean you were making a fool of me?
I was making a fool of myself, Andre. Please forget it.
Forget it? No, my cold-blooded Englishwoman. I am not some stupid boy you can play with. You cannot throw me aside. I have risked my life for your happiness.
Risked your... Andre! You murdered Chud.
Of course I did. I hated him. And I hated the way he made you unhappy. And the fool gave me the perfect way to do it by telling me about his filthy story. And then forgetting that he had done so.
You devil, get away from me. I'm turning you over to the police.
No, you are not. You are going to join Chud since you love him so much.
Andre, put away that revolver.
Nice shooting, Watson. You got him in the wrist.
Sorry. Mrs. Stoner, are you all right?
Yes, but thank heaven you were both behind those curtains.
I'm sorry that we had to wait until the last minute to disclose our presence. But it's just as well to have witnesses to a murder confession. What do you have to say for yourself, Monsieur Leroux?
Nothing. Send for your policeman and have me taken to prison.
With pleasure. Watson, ask Inspector Lestrade to step in here, will you? Tell him we have a customer for him. A customer for the gallows.
Midnight. It'll be good to get back to Baker Street. It's been an exhausting evening's work.
Yes, Watson. A sordid case. A shabby patchwork of discontent and hatred. Oh, well, we've been instrumental in sending yet another felon to his rightful destiny.
You know, Holmes, there's one or two points I don't quite understand.
I can't believe it, Watson. What are they?
Well, you said that all three objects you examined contained traces of wax.
They did, and at first that confused me. But there are various qualities of wax. For instance, Mrs. Stoner was knitting with a certain waxed wool that is used specifically in knitting for seafaring men. It gives the garments a weatherproof finish.
Never heard of it.
Possibly not, but it's a fact. And, as you know, I specialize in such odd pieces of information.
What about the traces of wax on the cards that Henry Seal used when he was playing solitaire?
Again, I was misled. Until I remembered that Mrs. Stoner told us that her brother had been playing the violin a short while before her husband's death.
Oh, he'd been using rosin.
Precisely.
Oh, yes.
Logically, it had to be the secretary. But the proof came when I made the final analysis of the three specimens of wax. That, on the account books, was the only one that exactly matched the traces of wax I found in the keyhole.
Oh, suppose I'm very stupid, Holmes.
Anything else bothering you?
Yes, just one point. You said that the dying man tried to indicate his murder by clasping the desk as he died.
Yes, I'm sure he was trying to give us a dying message.
Well, I was fooled by the violets and the seal.
That was a freakish coincidence. But the effort in crawling to the desk was not. That was the true message.
I still don't see it.
Oh, come now, Watson. The secretary was a Frenchman. The French word for desk and for secretary is the same. Secrétaire.
I see it now.
Oh, really, Watson?
You know, Holmes, you'll never get your fee for this case.
Indeed. And why?
Stoner's dead. He'll never sell that story to the Strand magazine now.
True, Watson. But I've no doubt that you will. Though perhaps it'll be a slightly different version of it. And you'll probably call it something very melodramatic. Perhaps murder in the locked room.
Ladies, when you want to look your radiant best, you naturally want your hair to appear just as beautiful and lustrous as it can be. So here's a tip from some of the world's most divinely beautiful girls, Powell's models. Girls who are famous for their enchantingly lovely silken sheen hair.
We glamour bathe our hair with Kreml shampoo. And I want to state right here and now that no other shampoo leaves the hair more sparkling clean. Really, girls, you'll be amazed how Kreml shampoo reveals all your hair's natural gleaming luster. It leaves hair shimmering with brilliant highlights that last for days.
Kreml shampoo is not a cream shampoo, not a soapless shampoo, not a harsh soap, not a drying detergent. It's entirely different. After a Kreml shampoo, the hair fairly radiates natural glossy highlights. And Kreml shampoo never dries or breaks the hair. In fact, it even has a built-in oil base which helps keep the hair from becoming dry or brittle.
How right you are, Mr. Bell. Kreml shampoo leaves the hair so much softer, silkier, with a lovely satin smoothness. The hair holds a wave better, too.
So, ladies, buy a bottle of Kreml shampoo at any drug counter. See how easy it is to have naturally lustrous hair, a vision of shining beauty. Kreml, Kreml shampoo. Now, Dr. Watson, what about next week?
Well, let me think next week. Next week, I think I shall tell you how Holmes and I returned to Baker Street one afternoon to find our rooms occupied by a beautiful young woman on the verge of hysteria.
Well, that sounds promising. And who was the beautiful young woman?
No, Mr. Bell. Mr. Bell, I've told you before about this. You'll have to wait till next week to find that out. I will say, however, that her story was horrifying enough to make our hair stand on end. I call this adventure Death in the North Sea.
Tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure was suggested by an incident in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's story, The Dancing Men. Nigel Bruce appeared by permission of Universal Pictures. Tom Conway through the courtesy of Eagle Lion Pictures. The Sherlock Holmes series is produced by Tom McKnight with original music composed and conducted by Alex Steinert. This is Joseph Bell speaking for Kreml Hair Tonic and Kreml Shampoo and inviting you to be with us next week at this same time when Dr. Watson will tell us about death in the North Sea. Save for the future the easy, automatic way. Buy U.S. saving bonds through your payroll savings plan or at your bank. This is ABC, the American Broadcasting Company.
Welcome back. I have trouble buying a dying person trying to leave behind a cryptic clue to the murderer's identity in real life, but it's detective fiction, so we will allow it, as they'd say on Perry Mason. I should let you know we are ending the end of our current series of Sherlock Holmes episodes with Tom Conway. We actually only have 4 more weeks after today, so be looking out for our next Sherlock Holmes series in the fall, which will star John Stanley. Well, Matthew, got an email from Matthew taking me up on something I said back on episode 449, which I believe was Wisteria Lodge. He said, I would, in regards to the episode's 449 after-show commentary, I would argue that Ronald Howard is the best Sherlock Holmes, and here's the reason why. He was a human Holmes. He was more kind and even made jokes. This might have not been as true to the Holmes stories as Rathbones was, but I'm an avid Holmes reader and fan and think it's a good twist. Well, that's definitely a solid argument. And there was something, there was a certain youthful energy about the way that Howard played the role, but also with a very strong sense of justice. There was certainly an appealing portrayal, although it's probably lesser known than either Brett or Rathbone among the general public. Well, thank you for making the argument. It's much appreciated. And then we received an email from Charlie, who says, love the app and the shows in it. Well, thanks so much for all your comments and support. We will be back next Thursday, another episode of Sherlock Holmes, and then tomorrow with yours truly, Johnny Dollar. By the way, I forgot to mention that the series with Ronald Howard is available on the Netflix Instant Watch if you're interested. Well, before we do get started with today's show, I want to encourage you, as you make your travel plans, to check JohnnyDollarAir.com first. Johnny Dollar Air is powered by Priceline, so that means you can either name your own price on hotels, rental cars, airline tickets, and more, or you can choose from the published specials. Either way, it gives you an opportunity to see if you can save some money, and your purchase goes to help support the great detectives of old-time radio. So when you make your travel plans, remember JohnnyDollarAir.com first. Now it's time for today's episode of yours truly, Johnny Dollar, the Tolhurst Theft Matter.
From Hollywood, it's time now for Edmund O'Brien as
Johnny Dollar.
Jim Madison at Tri-State. How are you?
Well, Jim, I'm fine, but what's this I read about you people?
You mean the Tolhurst theft, I suppose?
Yeah. No progress yet?
As a matter of fact, that's why I'm phoning. We tried to get you right after the robbery, but you weren't in.
Well, I was on a case most of last week.
Well, we had a call this morning. It was a woman who said she knew something about the case. Of course, it doesn't necessarily mean anything.
What did she say?
She wanted me to swear that we wouldn't call the police. And then she said she'd give us time to decide and call back about 3.
You want me to talk to her if she calls back?
Yes, I don't know anything about these things.
Are you willing to work without the police?
We stand to lose almost $50,000. We'll cut some corners if you will.
Edmund O'Brien in a transcribed adventure of the man with the action-packed expense account. America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to Home Office, Tri-State Insurance Group, Hartford, Connecticut. The following is an accounting of expenditures during my investigation of the Tolhurst theft matter. I note here the accepted report of the robbery because, as will be seen, both the police and the press missed a number of details. The Tolhurst fur shop was entered at closing time Saturday evening by 3 disguised men who, at gunpoint, relieved Mr. Tolhurst of almost $50,000. Answering a radio alarm, the police spotted the getaway cars that left Hartford, and later, south of town, after a running gunfight with another squad car, it was abandoned by the 4 men who were seen to split up and who escaped into some wooded terrain. That's where it stood. Expense account item 1, $1.50 cab fare from my apartment to the Tri-State offices, where your Mr. Madison was waiting for me a little before 3 p.m. The second call from his alleged informer came at 2 minutes after.
Yes? Yes, put her on. Hello? Well, I'm glad you did. I have someone here that I want you to talk to. No. He's not from the police. He's a representative of the company. Just a second. Here she is, darling.
Okay. Hello?
I don't like this. How do I know you're not from the police?
Well, I guess you can't be sure. All I can do is give you our word. And if you do want to talk to us, you'll have to take it.
The other man didn't say he was going to have somebody else.
He decided he'd rather do it this way. Now, listen for a second. To us, the recovery of the money is more important than having anybody arrested. If we can recover it more easily without going to the police, we're willing to do it. Doesn't that make sense?
Maybe. The police will have to come into it sometime. I know that. But also, I know I'm right. I've got my own reasons for going like this, and I know I'm right. I'll take your word for it.
And we'll keep it. Now, what is it that you know?
I know where one of the men is hiding.
Oh? Which one?
He's in a hotel in Boston. He's not using his real name, and I can't tell you what it is.
You mean you know what it is and can't tell us?
I'm a friend of his. That's why I'm calling. He's got to give himself up and get clear of it. That's what you've got to make him do.
I will if I can. What name is he using and what's the hotel?
I know I'm right. I know it. But you can't tell him how you found out where he is. You can't say anything about this call.
That's a promise, too. I won't.
The name he's using is Taft. He's in the Standing Hotel.
The Standing. Okay. Anything else?
That's all.
How do I get in touch with you again?
But you can't. There's nothing more I can do. Just be careful of him. He's awful desperate. Goodbye.
Huh? She's gone.
What do you make of it?
It's hard to tell. She says one of them is in a hotel in Boston, that I have to make him give himself up and be careful because he's desperate. She could be sincere. If she were just fingering this guy, it seems to me she would have called the police.
Then you think it's worth looking into?
Well, there's only one way to find out. Follow it up, see what's there. Expense account item 2, $32.50, car rental and mileage between Hartford and Boston. On the way, I tried to figure ways and means of making an appointment with a hunted armed thug, if that's what he was going to turn out to be. I found the Standing Hotel on the fringe of the commercial and waterfront section, and a man named Walter Taft was registered there. I staked out his corridor and saw him leave his room at about 7:30 that evening. He came back an hour later. When he put his key into the lock, I was strolling toward him, and when he opened the door, I was behind him. Can you hold it a second?
What do you want?
I want to talk to you.
I don't know. You haven't got time.
I'm interested in a man who's registered here under a phony name, Taft.
That's my name. Is there anything wrong with it?
Well, if it's your real name, then I'm wrong. Have you got anything that says it is?
Well, I don't see how it's any of your business, but sure, go on in.
Thanks.
Now, who are you and what do you want?
I guess the automatic tells me what I came to find out.
Who are you?
I'm a private detective. The insurance company that stands to lose on the Tolhurst job hired me.
That's a lie. You'd have brought the cops if you were.
I've got a wallet in my hip pocket. There's a license.
Don't reach for it. Just turn around.
Sure. You're really jumpy, aren't you?
Here, catch. You don't expect me to swallow this, do you? You were hired by Alan Les. All right, so you found me. Now, what do you think you're going to do with me?
You having trouble with your friend?
I said, what do you think you're going to do with me?
It's going to help if you can convince yourself I'm telling the truth. We want to recover the money, and if you'll help us to do it, we'll try to see that you get a break.
Well, that's a laugh. How would an insurance company find out where I was?
Sometimes they get a tip when the police don't. They can pay for information, the police can't.
Now, where would they get a tip from?
Somebody here in the hotel that figured something was wrong with you. There are fair descriptions out on you and your buddies for size and color and clothes. Somebody could have spotted you.
I can't buy it.
It happened, and the tip was right. You might do yourself a lot of good going to the police by yourself.
Either you're off your nut or you think I am. Come on, start backing up.
What for?
Because I'm leaving. Go on, get started.
If you were thinking straight, you'd talk it over. You're mixed up in a double cross, so you can't believe anything.
That's far enough. Who told you about a double cross?
You did. You said you thought I was hired by Alan Les. They were in the job with you, weren't they?
All right, turn around. Open the closet door. Turn around.
By the time I was on my feet again, he'd had at least 20 minutes start. After I cleaned up some in the crummy bathroom and stopped the bleeding, I looked the place over. There was nothing in it. He'd obviously checked in without anything but the clothes he'd been wearing and the automatic. That was all at the Standing Hotel. I drove back to Hartford and phoned Mr. Madison at home.
I'm sorry, Johnny. Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm not complaining, just telling you what happened. I guess I asked for it, bullying in like that, but I couldn't think of another way to get to him alone and get to the point in a hurry.
Well, do you think you should have called the police?
I didn't for two reasons. They'd just be sore at us for not reporting the girl's call to them earlier, and I hated to cross her at this point, in case she might come back to us with some more information.
Well, I guess we aren't any worse off than we were before she called, are we?
No, we made a little progress. We know there's trouble between the men. We're fairly sure they're all still in this part of the country, and we have a couple of first names. And if you want me to stay on the case, there's another angle I'd like to look into.
What's that, Johnny?
From the beginning, it's bothered me that a furrier would have that much money in his store, no matter how fancy.
Well, he said he hadn't banked for 4 days.
It's still too much money. I suppose the police have covered it, but a thing like that could develop into a lead.
All right, let's try it.
Good. I'll go see Tolhurst in the morning. Maybe I can handle him without getting myself slugged.
Of course. I'm at your service.
Thanks, Mr. Tolhurst. I know you've answered a lot of questions already.
Yes, I have.
So I won't drag you through the details of the actual theft again.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you.
Now, the amount of money you lost, almost $50,000.
That question again, why did I have that much in my shop? I have answered that question every possible way without smearing my own good name. The police have driven me mad.
I'd like to have the answers, too.
Very well.
Don't most of your customers purchase with checks, Mr. Tolhurst, or on credit?
No, they do not.
I'd think that they would.
Because you don't understand. The fur business, even more than the jewelry business, is concerned with making beautiful women more beautiful. Don't you agree?
Sure I do.
Well, I hope this doesn't come as a shock to you that there are many, many more wealthy husbands than there are beautiful wives, as opposed to women, that is. So, who would you expect these wealthy husbands to buy the furs for?
Yeah, I see what you mean. Cash purchases, too, huh?
Precisely. If wifey doesn't get the coat, she better not run across a check paying for one. The fur would fly, you might say.
But almost $50,000 in 1 week, that's a lot of intrigue.
One sable was worth $35,000. And if the name of the purchaser became known, it could literally endanger the national security. I really mean that. It would be discussed from the floor of the Senate. What can I do?
There's no record at all of these sales?
Barely enough to keep my books legal. I've rather specialized in this cash and carry trade. If I was strapped to the rack, I couldn't name these men. I'm helpless.
I think the insurance company might be able to fight your claim because of the stand you're taking. Had you thought of that?
Oh. No, I hadn't. Well, it makes no difference. I'm completely helpless. Unless a member of the board or somebody is an old customer of mine. And that is possible, you know.
I tried a few more approaches on Tolhurst without getting any place. I didn't fully believe him, but I did have to admit that business dealings like that were possible. I left the shop a little after 11 and went to my apartment to call in a report on this phase of the deadlock. My phone was ringing when I got there. Hello? Hello?
Captain, help me.
What? I can't hear you. Who is it?
Yesterday.
You're the woman I talked to yesterday?
Just to help.
Well, what's the matter with you? What happened?
They were here.
Where are you? Where are you?
Stoddard.
Stoddard Street?
Yes.
What number?
5860.
5860. An apartment number?
Number 12.
All right, I'll be there in 10 minutes. Dollar, I'm coming in.
They went after Fred. You gotta go help him.
Now, wait a minute. Who are you talking about? The men called Allen Les?
I don't know them. First, they said I had the money and they beat me. One of them held my mouth so I couldn't scream, and the other one hit me.
Do you know where the money is?
No, they wouldn't believe me. Then they made me tell them where Fred is.
Fred is the man I saw last night at the Standing Hotel?
Yes. I can't keep quiet for him anymore. His name is Fred Terrell.
And he's holding out the money.
That's what they said. They said they'd kill him if they had to.
If they look for him at the Standing, they won't find him. He left there last night.
I know. He called. I tried to lie that he was still there, but they phoned him and found out he wasn't. And they started him again until I told them. He moved to an auto court, and that's where they're going.
Where is it?
I'm not sure. Between here and Boston. But I think it's in the States. It's called the Oak Springs Motel. I tried to warn him. But whoever answered hung up because they couldn't hear what I was saying. I couldn't talk.
What's your name?
Virginia Cowley.
Well, how do you fit into this? How much do you know about the robbery?
Nothing. I didn't know about it until afterwards. Red's car was here. He came to get it and said everything had gone wrong and he was in bad trouble.
Yeah. Now we all are. You should have told the police, and I should have. Promise I know. I'm going to call them now and hope I can fight my way clear of this mess. There's the telephone.
We will return you to yours truly, Johnny Dollar, in just a moment. Americans now have a double job to do. We must produce enough goods to supply our armed forces, and we must also see that civilian needs are met so that we can prevent further inflation. Better production means greater strength and greater insurance that our free American way will continue. Do your part. Now, with our star Edmund O'Brien, we bring you the second act of Yours Truly, Johnny Dollar.
In an attempt to help what was left of my position with the police, the first thing I told them about was the possibility of nailing the 300 men together. But that backfired, too. It took me 20 minutes to learn that the Oak Springs Motel was about 12 miles south of town, and it took me another 15 minutes to get there. 2 squad cars were in the driveway, and that looked all right. But when I got to the cottage where Lieutenant Crockett and the other officers were, things looked all wrong. The bodies of 2 men lay on the floor. Neither one was Fred Sorrell.
Who are you?
My name is Dollar, Lieutenant.
Oh, yeah.
Sorrell did this?
Seems to be some confusion about the name. The cottage was rented by an A.J. White.
Sorrell was hiding out under a couple of aliases.
Too bad we didn't have that information.
I didn't know who he was until a half hour ago when I called you.
They were already dead a half hour ago. Is there some reason you couldn't have found out 20 minutes before that?
Yeah, I didn't happen to be any place this Cowley woman could get a hold of me.
She's the one you just got around to turning in?
That's right. First time I'd even seen her. First time I knew where she lived. First time I knew anything about her. I've done the same thing before, and it's worked out. This time it didn't.
What do you mean?
An anonymous call. She said she had information about the Tolhurst robbery that she couldn't give to you. She gave it to me in confidence, and I played it that way.
You still playing it that way?
No. I'll give you everything I've got, which still isn't much.
Let's go back to town and where we can get a real statement. Henderson, take over here, will you? I'm going back to the office.
Okay.
I didn't score very heavily with the lieutenant. He listened to my story point by point, but as he mentioned, actually the only useful thing I gave him was a slightly better description of Sorrell than he'd gotten from the manager of the auto court.
I don't know what to think about it, Dollar. I know you guys figure you can operate that way, and maybe it works sometimes. Sure, people will talk to you when they won't talk to us. But you're always taking a chance that it'll get out of hand like this did.
This one was out of hand from the beginning.
And it's turned into murder now.
You aren't blaming me for that, are you?
No, but I want you to leave the case alone from here on. Stay away from the Cowley woman. Stay away from everything.
Does that mean I can go now?
Yeah. It might be a good idea if you went home and brushed up on a little police work.
You're really digging it in, aren't you, Lieutenant?
You got it coming. Go on now. I've got to get back on this thing.
I knew my license was probably at stake, but Crockett's attitude, right or wrong, was more than I could take. Virginia Cowley had been put in the police hospital, suffering from internal injuries caused by the beating. I went back to her address, lied my way past the landlady and into the apartment. From a notebook on the telephone stand, I learned that Sorrell lived in Princeton. That was my next stop.
Fred Sorrell? Yeah, he still lives here. I haven't seen him some time now. Seems to me he's out of town.
I came all the way up from New York just to see him. You suppose I could get into his place, leave a note or something?
Well, why don't you just go up and see if the other fellow's there? Name a Hacker.
Oh, a roommate?
Yeah, you could leave a note with him.
Oh, good. How do I get there?
Second floor, rear. Number's 210.
Friend of Sorrell's. I've got to see you.
He's sleeping in this joint. What's the matter with that jerk, anyway?
Fred? When did you hear from him last?
A couple of days ago. In some kind of trouble.
He sure is.
Wanted to borrow some money from me, the lazy jerk. Told him to go take a jump or get a job. One or both.
He wanted to borrow money?
Yeah. Want me to mail him $50. What's the matter with him, anyway? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, he's done it up pretty good. Have you heard about the Tolhurst robbery?
What are you handing me?
You know a couple of his friends called Al and Les somebody?
Hey, who are you, anyway?
Here.
Detective. You ain't telling me Fred's mixed up in nothing as big as the Tolhurst thing. He ain't got the brains.
He hasn't if he has to write you for $50 after he pulled it. What about Al and Les?
Yeah. Les Vernick and Al Hudson. I met him, but that's all. That's from out of town. Carrying it, too, huh? Hey, you ain't pulling my leg, are you?
No. Did he write you from Boston by any chance? The Standing Hotel? Using the name Walter Taft?
That's right. I knew those guys were no good, and I told him so. He was always talking big money. I never thought he had the guts for anything like that.
Don't congratulate him. He built it up to murder today.
Oh, quit it.
It must have been Al and Les. You'll read about it, but for now, take my word for it. There was a double cross, or they figured there was. They were both shot, and Sorrell is still on the loose.
This is straight. He wouldn't come here, would he?
I don't know what he'd do. He must be half crazy by now. Can you think of any place else he might go?
He's got a girl he mooches off all the time.
Yeah, I know about her. He wouldn't go there, not now. He wanted a place to hide out. He was driving his car so he could travel for some distance, but not far. If he's thinking at all, he'll know he has to get rid of it.
I don't know. I'm not holding nothing back. A guy does anything like this, he doesn't deserve help from anybody.
By this time, he probably thinks he does.
You don't think he'd pull his old lady into the mess, do you?
He might. Where is she?
She's got a farm. I never saw it, but he talked about it once in a while. Little place she runs with an old guy helping her. It ain't far from here.
Do you know where it is?
Somewhere west. Hey, that's her picture. I think the name of the town is on it. Down here in the corner. I just remembered it. I noticed it.
Torrington. Sure, I know where that is. About 25 miles. I'd like to look at some of the rest of his stuff, if you don't mind.
Go ahead. This is as bad as you say it is. You can do anything you want. If you don't mind, I'm going to move out until this is cleared up. I don't want that crazy jerk to be coming back here while I'm around.
Nothing in Sorrell's things gave a hint as to where he'd be likely to go, but to stay on the move more than for any other reason, I decided to cover the farm. And to stay on the safe side, I stopped by my apartment to pick up a pocket gun. Well, it's a sort of a social call. Mrs. Sorrell here?
No, she went to town. Why, she went with her.
I was passing through. I know her son. I thought I'd stop by.
Oh, you're a policeman then.
What makes you say that?
We heard about Frederick. At least some of us did. We kept it from Mrs. Sorrell. That's why we sent him to town. We don't want that poor soul to learn about him until it's all finished. Did you think he'd come here?
How much do you know about it?
Somebody heard on the radio about the murders. You think he'd be hidden here?
Not exactly, but every possibility has to be covered.
He'd never come here. He wouldn't be turned out by his mother, but the rest of us would make short work of him. You're welcome to search the place if you choose to.
Has he been in touch with Mrs. Sorrell through this thing?
Nobody's been in touch with Mrs. Sorrell. She don't read her own mail or the papers either, because she's blind. She don't listen to the radio or talk on the telephone because she's nearly deaf. Frederick is a rotten apple that hasn't been allowed back here for 3 years.
And she doesn't know about him?
Not for almost that whole time. Oh, yeah. She thinks he's a big success in the hardware business. And we've talked about it already. We think he's going to start a business in Australia. And his mother will think he's there until she dies. And you ain't going to tell her any different.
I don't see why I should.
Yeah. Want to search the place?
No, I don't want to, but as long as I'm here. Sorrell wasn't there, and by the time I left, I was made to feel like a criminal myself for looking the place over. By the time I got back to Hartford, the extras were out saying, widespread search fails to uncover killer. And something that had been bothering me came to mind again. Why, with a $50,000 haul, hadn't Sorrell gotten out of New England? A few more questions fell into line, too. How could an amateur like Sorrell escape a full-fledged police search? And why would he even think of a double cross on his first job? And finally, why, after running out of Boston, would he have come back to an auto court 12 miles south of Hartford? I covered the final point and learned that the Oak Springs Motel was within a few miles of the point where he and the other two men had abandoned their car and taken off on foot.
I thought I told you to stay away from this case.
You can't take away my right to make a living, Lieutenant. I found his car. Isn't that worth anything?
How do I know what it's worth?
It's something you haven't done with all your roadblocks. I'm 5 minutes away from his car, and I think he'll come back to it as soon as it starts to get dark. Can't you take a chance on it and have a few men out there?
All my men are busy. I'll see what I can do.
It's less than an hour till dark. I hope you make it. I'd come back to the auto court and then found the approximate spot where Sorrell and his friends had left their car. I'd found a pair of ruts winding through the trees, and where they'd stopped, I'd found his car. When I got back to it after talking with Lieutenant Crockett, I put my car under as much cover as I could find and waited. I was still there alone when the sun started to set. And then I heard him before I saw him.
You. What are you doing here?
Don't try with a gun, Sorrell. I've got one, too, this time.
What are you doing here?
I've been almost every place else. Doesn't make any difference to you that I'm here. There's no place for you to go anyway. You've been safe here in the trees. But you couldn't get any place else.
I could make it if I wanted to.
No, you couldn't. You missed when you didn't make it before everybody knew who you were. Right after you pulled the job, yes, but not now. You must have realized that.
I can make it.
Not now. Why didn't you go any farther than Boston? Why did you come back to Hartford?
I had my reasons.
You still got them?
What do you mean?
You killed Les Vernick and Al Hudson and then came right back here to the trees. I don't think you double-crossed them. I don't think you even got the money beyond this grove.
You know where it is?
No, I don't, Sorrell. That's only what I think. And you had to kill them because all they could figure was that you double-crossed them.
You want to help me? You want to? It's here, all of it.
It's too late to help. You killed them.
But it's all here. $50,000. I came down the road, and then I turned that way. That's when they were shooting at us. I was carrying the money, but I was excited. Alan Les went that way, and I came this way. I'm sure it was here. Yeah, I remember that big tree. I went past it. I'm sure.
You could find $200,000 and it wouldn't do you any good.
Yes, it would. You could buy anything with money, and it's all here. I know it was here because I ran on this road, and this is where the road ends. And I went past that tree, and I can just remember how far I went. Because I put it down, and I covered it over with some leaves. If I just saw them, I'm sure I'd remember.
Sorrell.
I know where it is. If
Hey, what are you...
I want your gun, sir.
Get away from me! Get away! Quit it! No! It's all here! It's all here and I'm going to get it! Now get away from me! Get away, you...
All right.
Get away!
All right. Expense account item 3, extra mileage, etc., $43.60. Expense account total, $77.60. Remarks: a police searching party finally found the satchel of missing money, so the company is not out. Lieutenant Crockett and I finally got together, so I'm not out. The girl is nothing. So it leaves Sorrell, who really lost his mind over money, and the furrier Tolhurst, who didn't lose anything, not even that universal customer, the wealthy American husband. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, stars Edmund O'Brien in the title role and is written by Gil Dowd with music by Wilbur Hatch. Edmund O'Brien can soon be seen starring in the Paramount Pictures Technicolor production Silver City. Featured in tonight's cast were Parley Bear, Virginia Gregg, Stacey Harris, Bob Sweeney, Herb Butterfield, Clayton Post, and Howard McNear. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, is transcribed in Hollywood by Jaime Del Valle.
Welcome back. Well, a somewhat cynical episode in its view on the fur industry, but overall a pretty good episode. This one, the mystery, of course, wasn't as much a whodunit as why did it with regards to the money, because his actions were very erratic, but well explained and well wrapped up here. And an interesting fact from John Abbott's book on Johnny Dollar. It says that Virginia Cawley lived at 5860 Stoddard Street, apartment 12, and says that there is a 5860 Stoddard Avenue today in Hartford, so sort of based on a true address. I should also mention that we did have a missing episode in between last week's show and this week's, the Janet Abba matter, which was actually a pretty good-sized expense account, $2,796, but that one actually involved a trip to Malaysia, so that's why that one ended up so much. All right, well, I do want to let you know I've added another series to the Yes list, and the series is Manhunt. It was a 15-minute detective show. Really about 11-minute mysteries, so pretty tight, but usually pretty good stories. For those of you who have the app or a premium site, that is going to be added as an extra you can listen to and enjoy. Well, we turn now to listener comments and feedback. Received an email from Val in London, who says, I first started listening to your podcast about 2 years ago, both Great Detectives and Dragnet, and have just caught up with you. The email is simply to thank you for bringing these wonderful programs to a wider audience. Coming from the UK, I had no cultural memory of most of these programs, Sherlock Holmes accepted, of course, and would be hard-pressed to play favorites. Well, actually, I wouldn't. Johnny Dollar every time, but the other programs have been wonderful revelations too. Love Box 13, Good Night, Susie, Let George Do It, but do miss the original Miss Brooks and Nero Wolfe. But I'm also really enjoying Dick Powell at the moment. And she goes on to write some more about Dragnet, which you've heard on the most recent episode of that, if you listen at radiodragnet.com. And then we have a couple quick comments from Podcast Alley. Interesting comments with each episode. Great stuff. And then simple from Martin, I listen every night. Well, that'll do it for another week of the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio. We'll be back on Monday with Barrie Craig, and on Friday with another episode of yours truly, Johnny Dollar. In the meanwhile, email me at box13@greatdetectives.net. Give us a call at 208-991-4783, and if you're not already, become one of our friends on Facebook. Facebook.com/Radio Detectives. But from Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham, signing off.